Councillor Wilson.
I'd first of all like to thank Councillor Thompson for giving us the ability to continue to investigate this and discuss it. It's not committing to it, it's not doing anything else, it's just having a look at how this could work. I'd also make it very clear that this is on the basis that I understand that the Mosgiel-Tari, the Facilities Trust have undertaken to raise 7.5 million of the funds. I wouldn't be going near this if that was at all in doubt, and I have huge confidence in their ability to do so. But at some stage along the way, that will be a prerequisite. I just want to make sure that that's well noted. I have talked often in the last 3 days about not just debt, but considering assets and other benefits. And for me, I take a slightly different view on the spatial plan than some of the councillors. I think that this frees up an asset for the central city residents to have much better access to the pool in Mana Pool. I don't think we're going to find it at all easy to increase the aquatic services otherwise in Dunedin. In fact, I can remember some councillors at some stages trying to increase the use, the length of the period of some pools in order to do that. So I think this is about acknowledging that there is a real risk to other facilities and other pools in Otago being available. We have no surety of what they're going to be at any school and or what they're going to be like places like Milton. I think they do pull in a lot of people. Our Strathclyde pool is small and not probably much better than the milk shed itself. Pulls in people with 20-minute drives quite regularly from all over the Greater Strathclyde. That's just what happens in the rural area. People drive 20 minutes. That may sound terrible in some people's minds. That's a reality in the country, and I think 20 minutes for people to travel for something as to have access to water, which I think is a core purpose of a council to supply access to swimming pools, then I think that that isn't a bad plan to have. I appreciate that 4-pool option is aspirational. Again, I think that is it covers the range of facilities that people are now demanding, and I'm not sure that we can supply the capacity anywhere else. So I welcome investigations into it and taking it further. Whether I will vote for it in the end at that level, at least give the opportunity for people to keep on investigating it and understanding whether it can both work financially and work and be aspirational about it. So I'm going to vote for this. There's a lot of hurdles yet to come through, but I really appreciate the work that Richard's done into getting to this point, because I think it gives us a heck of a lot more confidence than we might have had otherwise.
Councillor Noon.
Thank you, Worship. Look, I support the concept of a new aquatic facility in Mosgiel. However, I'm concerned about two things with regards to the recommendations that are in front of us. Firstly is the Waipori Fund. I see that the mover and the seconder and others don't take this personally, but I think you see it as a soft target. And I feel that in fairness to the fund, which started off at around about 50 million in 1998 or whenever it was, and it's now sits at about 70 odd million. So there's a 20 million gain over that period of time. So that's quite a significant growth in the asset, let alone all the dividends in that we've had in that time. And the other concern I have, and I absolutely applaud Councillor McTavish and her staunch approach on the spatial plan. It's very pure, and you gain a lot of respect for what you've said. And I would certainly support Councillor McTavish's view on recommendation 2, and I would not be supporting recommendation 2. And the other thing that's worth noting about the Waipori Fund is it will require a 3/4 majority to allow that fund to be used for anything else than it currently is at this point in time. I know that's jumping the gun, but it's just worth reminding us all.
I will also be supporting this. I think the Target Trust team and the DCC staff should all be applauded for the work they've put into this, because it's definitely not an easy project. What gets me is this is consistently, programs like this, facilities like this, is all about getting people active and getting the community active. And I think that is a real big positive. What also hits me quite firmly is how much the community, the Mosgiel community, have consistently been behind this project, and the numbers show how valuable it is. When 92% of the community want a learner's pool, 87% want a lap pool, and 82% want a recreational pool, it really shows how much they are behind it. And I also look at, when you look at I go back to the playground. It's not going to be just a Mosgiel or a Taieri, it's going to be a destination. It's going to be a community, it's going to be the Saddle Hill community are right behind it. They want to use it and be active with it. And I think anytime we can get more people swimming and in the water, I think that's a win.
Councillor Hall.
I'll be supporting this, but what I would like to see is, if it doesn't go ahead, what is going to be the cost to the city of getting extra parking at Waianapool and upgrading Waianapool so people can use it. So we need to be able to have both those together so we can look at the actual difference in cost, because Waianapool is not servicing the whole of the city at the present point in time. So we need to have both figured out. So if we don't get ahead with the Taieri, we're still going to have to spend how many million at Waianapool.
Any other speakers? Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you to Councillor Thompson for what I'm advised shouldn't be called creative accounting. That has a pejorative implication, which I didn't mean, so apologies. But his nimble thinking, as I believe it's been referred to, has made this discussion more interesting than I had otherwise anticipated. Few people will doubt the need for some infrastructure in the Mosgiel Taieri area. That much is plain. I can support motion 1, although I do share the unease that has been expressed around the use of the Waipori Fund, but I do struggle to support the second motion for the planning reasons that have been articulated. But I think, with all due respect to Councillor Wilson, this does essentially make a decision that we're progressing with a 4-pool option, because this is the one that will be modelled and budgeted, and any alternative in later deliberations or otherwise won't have that work done to back it up, and therefore would struggle, I would think, to get the necessary support. A lot has happened, and I understand that it's important to get this into the long-term plan process, but a lot has happened very quickly on this work, and I think, and full credit to our staff and to the Trust for the work that they've done, but it has made it rather difficult to make, to get a meaningful hold on that work at this stage. And I am concerned, I think, that by essentially committing to that option, we end up with an all or nothing approach. Should it become ultimately unpalatable to fund a 4-pool option through this long-term plan process. And the only other comment that I have, and as Councillor Wilson pointed out, the only reason that we're considering infrastructure on such a grand scale is because of the fundraising commitment that has been made by the Trust. And it does concern me when we start to make major capital infrastructure decisions, not so much based on the need of a community, but how deep their pockets are. And so I can support 1, but I can't support resolution 2.
Further speakers? Before I come back to the mover, can I say that I recognise the need for a community aquatic facility of some kind and some scale in Mosgiel, and I really do applaud both the efforts of the Trust and the community that backs them, and our staff's efforts in a pretty short time to come up with the information and the analysis that they have. I would caution that because it's been such a short time frame, there is still a long way to go. There's still this resolution envisages a considerable amount of analysis yet. However, there are still a lot of unanswered questions, and for that reason, I can support one. I struggle with two, because with regard to the effects on the spatial plan, for me it's not a matter of the place being a destination or not. I'm not satisfied that sufficient information has been made available to decide if the proposed size of the complex will or won't compromise the outcomes of the spatial plan in terms of incentivising development or development pressures and that sort of thing. It's nothing for me, it's not about a destination. In fact, you want the thing to be a destination. It's the scale of it and what it does to other aspects of our forward planning and our infrastructure provision, etc. And in addition to that, I think that it's premature to be putting in even a placeholder budget ahead of any decisions that are made, ahead of any fundraising that's been done. I think we need to do this other work, and I applaud Councillor Thompson's lateral thinking approach and looking at it and looking at what the options are, and I really look forward to what comes out of that. So I'll be supporting one and I'm unable to support two, but obviously for that reason I shall be putting the two of them separately. Councillor Thompson, would you like to exercise your right of reply?
Yes, thank you. I want to touch on four things. One, the appropriateness of Waipori. Two, the issue of debt versus Waipori. Three, the issue raised with the spatial plan. And fourthly, and I think quite importantly, what happens if we say no? The appropriateness of Waipori. Firstly, that is one option that I'm suggesting, it is not by any means the only option. I do not expect what I'm suggesting to be understood by a wide range of the general public, but I would hope it would be understood around this table, and I'm not sure that it has 100% been understood. Firstly, the Waipori Fund has invested in property in the past, and there is no change in policy required for it to invest in property in the future. So that's the first point. Secondly, I am not proposing that the Waipori Fund be used for, quote, anything else that requires. I'm simply suggesting that it be used for exactly what it has done in the past, that it invests, and if it invests, it has to get an appropriate return. Now look, we currently invest, I've got a list of 75 shares here, public companies that we invest in. It's perfectly all right, apparently, to invest in Fisher & Paykel or Commonwealth Bank of Australia or Telstra or Spark New Zealand or a Chinese name I can't say, and get a return on that investment. But somehow, Lee, it's inappropriate to invest in community infrastructure that not only gets a same, in fact, average greater return on that investment, but provides and it facilitates something that the ratepayer can actually use as opposed to whatever the Chinese name does.
It's inappropriate for you to invest.
It's
I think appropriate for Waipori staff to invest.
Councillor Thompson speaking.
It requires considerable discipline on my part sitting next to Councillor Vanderbilt at every meeting. You understand that? So what I'm suggesting that is if it's appropriate for the Waipori Fund to invest in property, if it's appropriate for the Waipori Fund to invest in commercial shares, it does that on the basis of ensuring that it is going to get an adequate return. It assesses that, and what I've suggested that you could do that with a 7% return. Well, that's greater than its average return. If the managers of the Waipori Fund came back and said, not on your Nelly, it would have to be whatever, then it would have to be whatever. But I just note that we also invest in in just straight bank and bond investments. That's about 15 million at the moment. There's about 15 of those here. Only 2 of them return in excess of 7%. Others return 4.42, 5.43, 4.24, 5.8, 5.8. Where do you want me to stop? So this is not about raiding the cookie jar. It's about them getting an appropriate return on their investment. And let's just remind you, to the extent that it might need to be 8%, should it be, well then there will be an additional return at the other end in terms of potential revenue return to council as a result of the additional return on that investment. So, all right. Secondly, Councillor Calvert quite rightly says that this is debt in a sense, to the extent that at some point in the future, if you want to pay a rental, if you like, I'm using that metaphorically, to the Waipori Fund forever and a day, there will come a point at which, had you borrowed the money and repaid it, you wouldn't be doing that. So she's quite correct.
You heard that, all of you?
But this does not stop at any point in the future us reassessing that. Thirdly, in terms of the spatial plan, look, I take the point, but if we amend the size and scope of this, I can assure you we won't take out the learners pool, we won't take out the lap pool, we won't take out the leisure pool, we might take out the hydrotherapy pool, and we will then take out a significant and growing chunk of the Mosgiel revenue paying population. Finally, what if we said no? Well, I think if we say no to the trust, we will have to do something in the future. It will be less, the community will get a lesser asset, we will pay 100% of it, and it will cost us probably much the same, and everybody will be the poorer for it.
Thank you. I'm going to put it now, and as I said, I'll put the two parts of the resolution and the motion separately. So I'm now dealing with one. All those in favour of one, please say aye.
Aye.
Against?
No, recorded please.
Councillor Vanderbuss's. No? Okay. Number two, all those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? No. Could I have a show of hands, please? All those in favour of two, please raise your hand. All those against two, please raise your hand.
So are you going to give the community a chance to consult or not? That's the question you've got to ask.
Have we spoken? It's lost. So that's the way it ends up. And now it's afternoon tea time. We'll come back at 4:45.
Do you need a subsequent motion then?
Well, we're somewhat stuffed then because how do you have one without?
Yeah. I think we do need a subsequential, and I would be happy to move another pool option for inclusion.
Okay, well, if you gather your thoughts over the afternoon tea break and then bring it to pen.
Your Worship, while we're waiting for that, could we have an idea of how things are rolling out for the rest of the day? Some of us cannot be here on Monday.
Yes.
And there are some items that we would like to be attending to if... And
Okay, that's a good thought. I'd already discussed with staff the fact that Jennifer from Toy
He's
Tree
gone very quick.
can only be here today, and so we will do her a Toy Tree about 4:00, but we'll do it out of order in terms of the section that it's in, because Bernie can't be here today, so the library, so that's the one thing that we have decided we're going to do. But for the rest, I'm comfortable about fitting in what council and staff, what suits council and staff best. We won't be finished today, clearly. Well, my suggestion would be that when we've done this, we look at the two other big ones, which are surf lifesaving, and then, well, look at surf lifesaving, deal with it, and then look at where we are compared with we need to deal with Toitu at 4:30 and decide whether there's something else that we want to go on to. So if we had a suggestion that...
Well, I'm just wondering if you could ask all the councillors who may not be able to be present or have some things that they want to deal with when they can be here. I mean, I certainly put my hand up and say I'd really dearly like to be here for Tago Museum. I've got council business in War on Monday and will not be here. And I made that clear last year.
Are there other councillors who can't make it on Monday? Councillor Hawkins, okay.
And Councillor Brazil.
And Councillor...
I have real problems with Monday.
I can, but it's going to be difficult.
Right.
I'm similar. When I saw it was cancelled, I made an arrangement that I could unmake it again.
Yes, well, I mean, one thing is clear. We will be having to deal with things on Monday because we won't be finished today. There's no doubt about that. And I'm reluctant apart from the fact that there'll be people who've made arrangements at the end of the day. I'm reluctant, given the intensity of each day, to go beyond 5 o'clock. In any case, I think we have had, I think we do pretty well in the time we've got, but I don't want to tempt fate by dragging it out. So there's about 3 or 4 who may not be here on Monday. And Kate, you've suggested a preference for dealing with the museum today. Are there particular preferences, Aaron? Do you have a particular preference for anything that you would not want to miss, despite the fact that you're not here on Monday?
Cricket lights,
Gary.
in the City of Literature paper.
Sorry?
It's oh, we can't do stuff Bernie because Bernie's like going to Monday.
He'll be here Monday.
When are we doing the Gigaton paper?
It's scheduled for the end of as Richard and Lee and John.
I will find a way. I'll calm down by this question.
Is there a song?
I was just going to
You have
suggest
been sitting next to Lee for 2
there may be.
To get a meal.
What I was going to suggest is we pick out there may be 2 or 3 that could take some time and be contentious, and maybe slot them in on Tuesday afternoon, and for the rest of the day look at those other issues that we can tidy up.
Tuesday, you mean Monday?
No, I'm saying Tuesday.
I'm not even sure we've got.
Tuesday night, it's not going to work.
I don't think there's been any time allowed on Tuesday.
Right.
If only because John, the whole lot of other things slotted in, because Tuesday was never scheduled. Okay, right, well, let's finish this one now, go on to, and then stop, and on this section, sport, recreation and leisure, go on to museum. If the councillors want it, we can go straight on to Gigatown.
John's not here now, I think.
Oh, John's gone, so we'll do museum and we'll do Tuatu at 4:30, and we'll come back to sport and recreation and work through. Everyone happy with that? Best we can do, I think. Councillor McTavish.
Thank you. Your Worship, there are 2 parts to this motion. I'm willing to withdraw the first part if the discussion around the table suggests that that's the best idea. But if I can explain why I've put the 2 parts in there to begin with, and then I'm willing to hear people's views. So the feedback from the Trust to date has been that they would like something in the long-term plan to signal a commitment and the beginning of a conversation with the Council. That is why I think having something in the plan is a good idea, to show that we do have a baseline commitment to a community pool facility in Mosgiel, and that we are willing to have that conversation. I can see another view which says if we put something in the budget which is well under what the community trust is expecting, then they may take that as a negative signal, but I would hope that they wouldn't. I would hope that they would see that as a positive signal and a positive beginning to the conversation. The second part of the motion is about putting the 3 options in front of the community so that we can hear from the community as a whole about the relative acceptability of each of those options, both from our urban community and from our rural community, and the community that is particularly going to be served by this pool. So that's the intention of these 2 motions, yeah, but I'm happy to pull the first one if the feedback around the table is that it would be better for us not to have a budget line in there for the purposes of consultation.
Okay. So it's been, is there a second for that? Councillor Noon, so it's Councillor Benson.
Well, it's a question really, but if I could ask the mover, just at the first line, confounds me a bit because we don't have a commitment. So how can we know? We haven't yet made a commitment to providing a community pool in Mosgiel, as far as I'm aware. We're talking about funding options and investigating it and the rest of it, but we haven't got a commitment. So you might want to say council is committed or something, but you can't note a commitment because there isn't one.
Oh, sorry, I should have articulated that better. If there is a better way of framing that, I guess I feel that we do have something of a commitment to...
Indicates a commitment.
Sorry?
Indicates
its commitment. Yep, that's fine.
Right. Discussion. Councillor Thompson.
Well, I think one has to come out. Frankly, having rejected a figure that had some basis, to simply put another one in that's got no basis whatsoever, other than that it's 250,000 less than the first one, is annoying in the extreme. I think that if we're going to go out and provide information on a 2, 3 and 4 pool facility and seek feedback as to their acceptability, I'm totally accepting of that, and I think we should do that. But I think that it would be waving a red. It basically is saying, well, we're going to ask you what you think about those 3 things, but we're telling you before you think about them, this is the figure we're looking at. So I just, why don't, if we weren't prepared to accept the first one, then we should simply say, these are the options. Take a couple of weeks, hopefully, to try and ensure that whatever goes in that document has the combined support of the trust and the city, and where there are points of difference, where there's not agreement, then note those. That you can do it in a way that puts parameters or degrees of risk or whatever, and then let's revisit the quantum then, rather than trying to suggest one that I think will just get up the community's nose myself.
Well, in the first instance it's up to the mover and seconder, in the second instance I can take them separately.
Yep, look, as I indicated at the beginning, I'm happy to remove it. It is not a figure entirely without basis. It is, and I'm happy to go into that if necessary, but I'm also equally, unless there are others around the table who feel strongly that there should be a budget line in there, I'm happy to remove that.
So can I formally ask one to be removed then by the mover and seconder?
Yeah, well...
I'm happy as well, and I think it's the lack of information that we've got at this point in time, and I think we're better to hang off until we've got some more firm numbers to be able to...
There's 2 ways to find out whether it's acceptable to the council. One is to have a straw poll around the table like you do, and all the other is to have a vote. But you decide what you want to put up.
I think Pam has removed it, and I'm quite comfortable.
So, can I ask whether the mover and seconder are prepared to remove the whole of one? Because once we've made a commitment to something that we've got no idea about, I don't know what that actually means. I don't think we can make a commitment to...
Well, that's what we're voting on.
Yeah. Oh, yes, sorry, I thought the mover had offered to take away one.
I'm happy to, and if that's the feedback from council, I will. The reason I think it's there is because I take the point that's been made by a couple of councillors around the table that I would not like the Taieri Community Trust to feel that this council did not have an ongoing commitment to providing a community pool complex in Mosgiel. I personally am committed to that. I think that we have an existing pool complex out there at the moment, and that we absolutely need to provide a baseline level of service into the future. And so that is why it's there, but I'm relaxed about removing it.
The only way to find out if council is behind something is to vote on it. So please make up your mind.
I shall leave it there.
Can I ask before?
Yeah, carry on.
Sorry, can I ask before that final decision's made?
No, the final decision's been made. Please speak.
I've got a serious problem with one, and the problem I have is that the message I don't want to give to the pool trust is that I'm voting against having a commitment. I'm not voting for having a commitment because I can't commit to something I don't know about, but I'm now obliged to vote against it, and that's not the message I want to give, and I find it really unfortunate that we're now being encouraged to vote against something because it's worded so poorly that it obliges us to commit to something we don't know anything about. I think it's a pity, but if that's the way it has to happen, that's the way it has to happen. I'll be voting against whatever that first one means because I don't know what I'm committing myself to.
Thank you, Councillor Vanders.
A question. Councillor McTavish has said that we already provide a community pool complex in Mosgiel. I don't believe we do. I think we provide a community pool, but certainly not a complex. It's been, since when is a cowshed a complex? And Councillor McTavish's claim that they already have a complex and that we're committed to keep on supplying one, I think is less than helpful in terms of clarifying things.
I'm not sure that you're both talking about the same thing. This is talking about a future complex.
Yes, but just now, Councillor McTavish said that we already provide
Your Worship,
a
on the
community
basis
pool
that,
complex, and I don't believe we do. I believe we provide a pool, not a complex.
Currently moving along past semantics. Do you have a question?
My question is, how are the people of Mosgiel going to interpret pool complex in relation to the pool they currently have?
Your Worship, on the basis that there appears to be a lack of clarity around what the motion means, the mover, the seconder and I would prefer to withdraw the motion, the number one.
Okay, that's fine. Makes it simpler. Councillor Bizet.
Well, I'm pleased that you're withdrawing that because it didn't make sense when you look at the previous resolution that we did pass. In that context, it says something sort of similar, so I didn't think that was necessary. Are we debating this, or you want questions? I'm sorry.
I'm happy for you to ask questions, but we are in discussion.
Yeah, okay. Well, the second one, I don't support that at all because I do think we need to put some funds in there. If you just put it in the unfunded for the purpose of consultation, people will say, yeah, well, we could go for the four-pool complex because they've got no idea what it's going to cost, and they'll go for the best. I think the suggestion that Councillor Thompson did before, based on his analysis of the 700,000, was sensible and gave people some indicative costs. I think that was the better way to go. So I'm not sure what the answer is, but I'll be voting against this and trying to find some other way of getting involved.
Firstly, could I ask a question? As we go for consultation, would we be including the potential rates impact for the unfunded items so that the ratepayers could see that potential? So in here, just in response to Councillor Bizet speaking to it, I think we do achieve that with this resolution, provided that there is that rating burden indication in the consultation document. So residents do know what the rating impact is going to be, remembering that as we come to debate the final plan and approve the final plan after consultation, we will be deciding whether to put a number into that plan and how big that number will be. So by providing an indication of the rating impact, which is going to be, if it's $700,000, it's about 0.5% on rates, then I think we should have that in the consultation document. That then gives our residents an opportunity to say, well, if we build a four-pool complex, it's going to be 0.5% on our rates from this point onwards. So I think I can support this on that basis.
Further speakers. Councillor Wills.
Just want to check that we have had two motions now, or suggested at times, which picked a date, and I'm not quite sure that those dates that those have been picked at reflect what should be a partnership ongoing with the Facilities Trust. And I'm quite glad to see that we're not putting a date on this work, because I would hope that we're going to be seen to be constructively going to them to advise the dates that they think that they can get the money in by, and to work from that in the form, although I have an idea that Councillor Thompson may have taken that into account in his motion, but that we look at what they're proposing and can do in light of this and actually build that into the consultation document. We've just potentially changed things. They may say at 2 pools they're not going to put any money in, which would make Councillor Thompson correct, but they at 4 pools it may look different. And I think that, I hope we're going to honour what is an ongoing partnership with them to get that advice and not just try and do this all in-house, is my comment, and I will support it on that basis.
Councillor Pitt.
Yeah, well, I think we had a chance to put a big toe in the water without taking the plunge on the previous resolution, and we dropped it. One word will stand out in that resolution to the trust, and it will look like we haven't got very much confidence in pushing along this project. And I agree with Councillor Wilson that we have here a community organisation that is promised to raise $7.5 million itself. And what are we doing? We're just saying, oh, we're floundering around looking for some more information and trying to get a cheaper deal on it. And that's the way it will look to them. So I might have to abstain from this.
Further discussion? All right. Councillor McTavish, do you wish to speak to it?
Well, I think that the comments have been made about liaison with the Pools Trust in ensuring that this information that goes out is acceptable to both parties, I think is critical in the context of the MOU, and I didn't include that in the resolution. I apologise for the inadequacy of the resolution. If that is the case, I did it very hurriedly in 5 minutes, but if there are, I hope that that is clear to staff that that is intended to be the case.
Right, I'll put it. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against?
No.
It's carried. Do you wish to do that extension? Right. We'll do the next two lines in this. First is Botanic Garden, 16.14.
Your Worship, can I just ask a question about the Middlemarch pool? Were we going to deal with that?
Yes.
Were we going to deal with at the end of that item? Sorry.
Yes. So keep that in mind because I won't. So 16.14, Botanic Garden questions, councillors. Councillor Coe.
Could you just talk us through briefly the increase in interest for the glasshouse, Botanic Garden redevelopment project? It's probably in here, I just didn't.
Yeah, well, if I could, I hope it is in there. It's basically, it's a major capital project, just under $6 million, and this reflects the interest required to pay off the debt.
So when you say 66,
No, I didn't. It's a $6 million
increase in
project.
interest, is that because the capital was bigger or? Sorry.
Well, could I have a line to refer to for the?
Sorry, 1614? So it wasn't in the motion.
This is an increase in interest because we're now paying the full cost of
It's a
the
new line item
capital
this year
project.
because it's now built.
Because it's completed.
Apologies, I didn't understand the question.
But you're moving into? You're moving into?
I sincerely hope so. There are some nuts and bolts that need tightening. Yeah, some plants are in there.
Good job.
Just as a matter of interest, Nick, you're having an opening function?
Oh yes, there will be. Once we're confident that the environmental management systems are working as they should be, as the maintenance period's through, and I guess the guinea pig plants are still alive and performing, then it'll be safe for people to go in. Sorry, I hesitated to use the word sacrificial.
Okay. Further questions, councillors? If there are none for that, we'll go on to Parks and Recreation Services Planning, 16.12.
Is the Eco Centre reduction in rent, is that what we used to pay for basketball Otago? Or is that something else?
Sorry, go the line.
1620, we've got 38k reduction in rent for the Edgar Centre.
28. Yeah, this is the calculation that's organised in conjunction with the property department, which calculates the rent. And
So, what is the situation without any basketball? That's not relevant, it doesn't show up as...
basketball was, my understanding was that was a grant.
Yeah.
And that was a one-off discontinued.
Yeah, I appreciate that, but basketball Otago won't be having rental in...
That's a matter with the trust. That doesn't affect our service level agreement.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, councillors?
Well, I'm just wondering in light of that, because that I imagine is quite a big dent in their income. Maybe it's evened out by expenditure, but I'm just wondering before, if they've got any concerns because of that, the trust, and changing the service level, we should be knowing about it. It's, I think that's quite a big part of their income.
We would have expected to hear about any problem. We haven't, and my understanding is at this stage is that that their demand for use will cater for that.
Okay.
But that's my understanding at this stage.
Good.
Right, nothing further there? Okay. Well, can I suggest that we put that on hold and we go over to, if you'll recall, the two items that we do want to do today, and we're going to do toy turn in 20 minutes. The other one was the Battalion Museum levy on page 15.25. My suggestion is that we go to that and deal with it. Right. 15.17. Sorry, 15.25. Questions. Councillor Woods.
Otago Museum levy, I am Deputy Chair of that, but I don't think I've got a conflict in that role, and I just, because I'm there as a council appointment. And I just want to understand, I understand the need, or why there's a static budget for this year, and I imagine now that it's impossible to raise a levy anyway if we wanted to because of the ramifications to other councils. That would be your expectation?
To be honest, I'm not sure. I'm not, because I've only been here a short time, so I'm not sure how this process with the other councils work, and whether we set baseline and the others follow. I think, is that the case?
Yeah. Well, I suppose the question then is, the museum is undertaking, I think, better regional facilitation, and I'm not sure in that process whether any other councils want to pay any more, but I anticipate in the future, and I appreciate why it may not have happened this year, that there has to be some discussion, and maybe it's happened at a different level, maybe the mayoral forum, for that discussion about setting the levies and between the councils, and that may be something just for the future. But we've got a museum that's undertaking out of reserves initially, and in the long term hoping to do some development with co-funding for fairly exciting strategic developments at the museum that meet and answer some of the strategies of our city. And I'm just wondering how, that if the city doesn't co-invest in that, the ramifications will be, it doesn't necessarily have to be by levy, but it could be by a grant as well on top of that. And I'm just, the problem is we can ask the museum to come along to submit on that, which is fine, but that doesn't give notice to everyone else as ratepayers of the city what the ramifications are for that until, and whether they support or don't support it. And I'm just wondering whether we can add in either unfunded or funded for the purposes of debate and consultation, or get a report on what that would look like for the February meeting, to include something in there at least over the 16, 17 and 17, 18 as a contribution, either as a levy or as a grant. Have those ideas been explored with you, or would you need?
No, they haven't. And when the board came along and presented to us, they had a list of projects, but there was no talk at that stage of we would like council to commit X or any specifics. They were really talking about a list of projects they had. It was a wish list, and they were great. They were very exciting projects, but there was nothing really discussed in a concrete manner.
Okay. The question, have you got the resources and time if those came out? I understand the awkwardness of process, and I'm not quite sure that they understand the process that we have, as you don't understand necessarily their processes, but in order to get something that the community can consult on, have you got time before February, if some requests came in, to actually give us a paper so we could consider that?
Yeah, there's no problem with us. I guess we would be really reliant on the Otago Museum putting forward some really concrete proposals with something that would be looking to us to part fund in some way, whether to a one-off grant or whatever. And that's what we don't have at the moment. But they've probably moved on since we met with them last October, and they probably have more information they could provide. So that would provide the basis of any report we could bring back to you.
On that basis, Your Worship, I'm just wondering, having said I wanted the support for today, whether we could ask for a report and to leave this on the table until we get that report for the February meeting, so we have a better idea of what the requests may be. We can.
The alternative is to can deal with this and move something that asks for a report that comes back by that time, and then this is...
And put it in either funded or unfunded then, okay.
Yeah, so I invite you to prepare something to move.
Okay, thank you.
And I'll come to Councillor Kelly with a question.
I've got a question to Kate, who may be the mover, or she may not be, to Councillor Wilson. I thought we had talked to the museum last year and the museum was not proposing any increases for us, and I further think that this happens every year. So why are we out there looking for new people who might want to ask us for money? This process is here, it happens every year, and we were specifically, I think, told that we weren't being approached for more money when we last saw the director of the museum. So I'm bewildered as to whether this has moved into the sort of thing where we're going to look for more people who might want money from us.
I'm happy to answer that in relation, as I said, to the first part of the first project. There is not a request that's been done out of reserves. There's nothing, but we're talking about 10 years here, and the development project, which has been discussed with staff, and I don't know that there was any suggestion at any stage that there would not be a request as far as the redevelopment of the Discovery World. So this is, I'm talking in relation to Discovery World.
My understanding is that the bigger picture is that there's no increases budgeted at all, and they've already had 5 years or whatever it is of none.
Yeah.
So at some stage, and certainly in recent years, they have asked for more at various times, and so it would be not unreasonable but unexpected that they wouldn't.
But this year they haven't asked, and it may be that for next year or 3 years out, or next time we do a 3-year plan or something, but they haven't asked, and they know about the process.
Yes, they have asked. They thought they had asked.
But the point I'm making, Councillor, is that it's never been the case that someone comes along and asks for something 5 years out, and there's no mechanism for that. So I think that what Councillor Wilson's alluded to, or I may have got it wrong, but what I think you're alluding to is the need for us to look ahead and say, well, what's likely? Do we need to put something in outgoing years that there's no mechanism for asking for? I may have got that wrong, but
it's more or less.
I'm with Councillor Calvert on this. It's not for us to do that, it's for the museum to do it. And if they don't do it, then we just carry on business as usual.
The point I'm making is that you wouldn't expect them to be asking for something to be put in the budget. There's no mechanism for them to be asking in 1920 or 1819, but equally, I wouldn't have thought that our budgets would have no increase in expenditure that we know is going to go up.
That's uninflated, that line. So,
okay.
So can I just... The problem we have, well, one of the issues we have, the budgets, the departmental budget or activity budgets don't have inflation, but when you look at the high level budget, it is inflated. So going forward, there is an inflation component in the levy going forward. The museum did come along and talk to council staff. Both Simon and I were at the meeting, and they were given a clear indication at that time that there was no additional funding available for the 15-16 year.
Yep.
And exactly what Simon said about the capital, they were a lot of, they indicated, as Kate said, that a lot of their early work can be done out of reserves, but they might need some assistance over the 10-year plan. The problem that we have got, or council staff have got, is that we were not given any details about how much that assistance would be. They were talking about some assistance coming from outside organisations, Community Trust of Otago and other such entities, and council could have been a party. One of the issues that we have to be careful with is with the way we would fund any of that for this particular entity, because the levy that we get, we cannot, it cannot go down. Yeah, it's ratcheted, so it only means it can go up, so we'd have to do it via another mechanism rather than the levy. And so I think that's additional context that might help the discussion.
Well, we can come back to that and debate whatever the resolution is, the motion is. Are there any more questions? All right, we'll move on to that then.
It's still the case that some other authorities are not paying the levies that they're legislatively required to pay at the legislatively required level.
That's correct, yeah, there are.
Is it more than one?
I understand it is one, I believe.
What about Clutha? Aren't they paying a reduced amount?
Clutha, yes. Queenstown Lakes don't pay at all, but they're not required to. They don't, but they're not part of. They're not required to.
Right.
But Clutha choose not to pay the full amount.
They choose not to pay anything?
No, not. I think they. I can't remember the exact amount, but they don't pay the full amount. It's worked out on a percentage basis.
We could do the same. We could pay up. Oh, that'd be good. So.
Councillor Wilson, while Councillor typing it up, could you just read out the resolution and the motion and speak to it?
We asked staff to prepare a report on levy increases, a levy increase or a grant needed, if any, for strategic developments at the Otago Museum. In that, I know that it will not be in the 2015-16 year, but I couldn't bother putting that into the resolution. Do you want me to talk to it now?
Yes, please.
Yeah. Look, the developments at the Otago Museum talk to a number of both council strategies and to government strategies, and I'm quite excited about them. But in order to get the community debating them, there has to be there somewhere. At the moment, we haven't got any paper on it. I know that it's a quick changing world at the museum about these. They're really exciting developments. It is regrettable that they haven't had an opportunity to get them since October into council, but that's the nature of the bureaucracy, and I think the board members that are on that around this table now will probably be facilitating a lot better communication between the council and the board in future to make sure that we present information at a time that is more suitable to the staff here. The opportunity is now to put this in and at least get an idea of this information there and to give the community a chance to talk about it. Whether it's funded or unfunded, I don't know. And it may not be, they may not need a grant or a levy increase. But if we don't have a paper on it, then I think there's a good chance there'll be an opportunity lost for the city. I'm really excited what Ian Griffin and his team's brought to the museum, and I want to make sure that the community have a chance to consider what he's suggesting.
Councillor Kelly. Oh, sorry, Councillor Stainsview, and your hand up again, Councillor.
I support this resolution and declare that I'm also on the Otago Museum Board, but I think for a number of years the Council has held off any increase in the levy on the basis that we were not confident, perhaps in some of the decision making that was being made at the museum. That's now a completely changed picture, and I think it's been more than 5 years since the museum got an increase in the levy. I don't necessarily support a levy increase, but I certainly believe that the plans that the Otago Museum has in its redevelopment will have a lot of benefit for not only the residents of the city, but in terms of visitor attraction and visitor satisfaction with the product that we have here in Dunedin. So there's an economic benefit that will come from these upgrades. So I do think we need to consider it, and this is a good starting point to get something before us to help us understand how we might be able to contribute to something that at the end of the day will provide a better asset and potentially an extra revenue stream in our economy.
Thank you, Councillor Kelly.
I would like the mover to contemplate whether we could change the word needed to the word requested, and to add in beyond the 2015, 2016 year, since that was what you suggested and that is quite clearly contemplated, just to clarify that it isn't intended to be part of this year. Needed is just, to me, a loaded word. I mean, need is, whereas requested or...
I'm happy with either of those. I think the intent is the same. Yeah. I presume Chris is...
Yeah. So that's changing that, and the date is changing too, was it?
2015-16, beyond 2015-16, yeah.
Okay, Councillor.
The museum levy has increased in the last financial year, but it is the first time for a number of years that has increased.
Did we do that as a grant though?
No, the levy has gone up.
So, Councillor Petty.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I'm the third councillor appointed to the Trust Board, and don't have much to say. I just wonder whether that actually makes sense as the way it's phrased there, that staff be asked to prepare a report on... It doesn't make a syntax issue, unfortunately, but on whether, I think, whether there would be a request for a levy increase or grant for strategic development.
I think it's plural. If grants were plural, or grants requested, that might make the rule.
Well, I think we know the intention of it anyway. I just wanted to say that the organisation has transformed itself in the last year or two, and is in the process, as has been outlined anyway, of transforming its science area, which we call Discovery World, with the addition of a planetarium and some other changes. It is a hugely exciting development here to bring us into the 21st century in terms of how we look at science and interact with it. And then there's the redevelopment of the Taonga Whenua Gallery, which is coming up. So in the next 2 to 3 years, there's going to be quite a considerable change and a considerable different look to the Target Museum, which I think would be, so we are justified, I think, in just investigating whether there is any need for any more money from, money that we might be able to provide.
Okay. Councillor McTavish.
I support this. I was just going to make the clarification that Mr. McKenzie made, but I think that this is, it's difficult when we have some museums which sit within our departmental structure and some which I acknowledge are separate organisations but which we do have a close relationship with, to ensure that each are adequately represented within the processes that we have around budget time. And I think this is perhaps a case in which we could do a little better in that regard, and I think that this is a step towards that, so I support it.
Councillor Wiley.
I will be supporting this as well. It's great to hear what developments are going to be taking place at the museum. I just go back to seeing when the Butterfly World came on board and how that increased patronage and got people really engaged with the museum. When I see the word grant and levy and words like that, I also am conscious that we also have to have a user pay component in there. And Butterfly World was a clear case of that working, where people, and that, whether it's the planetarium, that we're not building something that people are going to come to when we give it away. So I'm conscious of that fact, but I will be supporting it.
Look, I'm just, one of the reasons I want this to come forward and to go out for consultation, and I should have mentioned it at the start, and I thank Councillor Pete for doing so, is that the developments at the museum is something that I've heard tangata whenua get really excited about at every level, every part of it, and it's probably the most excited I have heard them engaged with the city with one of those developments. The planetarium talks to them, the tangata whenua developments do, and the Discovery World and their views on that. And if there's one thing that I always like is when we can engage with a wider group in a better way that I think have been we haven't engaged particularly well in the past, and that's another reason why I want to make sure that we're making really good decisions on this.
Okay, we're going to put it. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against?
No. Recorded, please.
Some members. Recorded against. That's carried. Okay, we'll move on now to Toy 2. Welcome back, Jennifer.
Your Worship, I'm just wondering whether there were a number of parks and reserves related issues which we didn't complete, and the staff for that activity area are still sitting here waiting to finish those. You're aware of those?
I'm aware of that.
Thank you.
The change was to accommodate Councillor Wilson and Jennifer.
Right.
And we'll go back to those.
Sorry, I missed that.
So we're on page 15.17. Target Settlers Museum.
Just take questions, given the time of day.
Questions, councillors? Councillor Pitt.
Jennifer, just wondered about the energy savings. That's all very exciting. It's quite a big number that you're saving there, and I just wondered how you're managing that.
We've undertaken an energy audit, and we've looked very carefully at making sure we're running our equipment at the optimum level that it needs to be run at. So we're also looking at lighting, we're looking at heating. The other thing too is that we have in the redevelopment, we made that decision to install LED lights. So every single light in the exhibition space is an LED light, so it's very low energy, and also it doesn't put out much heat, so we're not having to take the heat away. And we've been operating now for 2 years, so we've realised how much we need, so there's a saving to be made.
Councillor Carroll.
The surveys, I'm wondering where we're going with the resident opinion surveys and the in-house surveys and things as to how much people love Toitu and the Chinese gardens, because the stats coming out are a wee bit confusing, but I mean, I take it that the measure of those are changing, but I don't understand how, and although one seems higher than the other, I don't, I particularly, partly the two different measures seem to me to be unique for Toitu in that resident opinion survey will not necessarily capture it won't capture visitors at all. And so, and because there's a significant visitor component in that in the Chinese gardens, I'm wondering how you propose to deal with that and what happens when they sort of hit a wee hiccupy low, and I don't understand how that happened.
Right, what we've got at the moment is we've got, I think, 94% satisfaction rating with Toitu, which is an increase on last year. We went up, and the Chinese garden has held steady at the same rate between this year and last year. And again, we realise there's a bit of work to do on the Chinese garden satisfaction level. On top of that, we also do an internal survey of the garden, which is a paper survey on satisfaction levels, and we also do an internal survey of the museum of satisfaction levels and visitor statistics as well. But to retain parity with all the other council departments, we're using the residents' opinion survey, and also because it is impartial as well. It's done by an external body, and it gives us a good measure and a good basis to compare with other departments.
So what are you doing
TripAdvisor as well? We're number one on TripAdvisor. Just get that in there.
What are you doing about the 59% satisfaction, which seems to me
at the Chinese garden? It is very low, but it's not gone down. We're hoping very hard we'll work very hard to try and get that up.
You're aiming for over 90.
At the garden, it's been very low for a long time. It's set, the target is set very high, but we will do our very best to get it up there.
Councillor Luke. Thank you, Worship. Jennifer, with the increase in external revenue, quite a jump up, and you've sort of been through the so-called honeymoon period, you're sort of confident that you're able to continue that trend at that level with regards to external revenue?
Yes, we've got a bit of work to do around external revenue, but we've set our targets very high, and we intend making those. At the moment, our visitation is running 13,000 higher than last year. So, though the trend would be for our numbers to go down, in fact, our numbers are going up. You come down and see us on a cruise ship day, it's extremely busy. We're getting the repeat visitation. That's what we aimed at, was repeat local visitation. We're getting that. We've got some new staff on board, and we're going to get some more smarts around our retail, and we've got a new retail person and a new venue hire person. So I think that we will be making big inroads into those revenue targets.
Thank you.
Jennifer, can you explain the revenue of visitor experience versus the expenditure of visitor experience?
We don't generate a lot of revenue in visitor experience. Visitor experience is the revenue in that section comes from our LEOTC grant and a bit of money coming in from grant funding. For example, we get $3,000 a year from the OSA for Pixie Town. Most of our grant revenue goes into overheads, and a lot of our retail funding and our venue hire goes into facilities.
So the expenditure would cover off?
We have a large amount of money in the exhibitions budget, which is in visitor experience, which covers all of our exhibition spaces and our special exhibition gallery.
And staff my consistency over the museum, Otago Museum, is there no thought of getting active with the cruise ship industry and other tourists visiting the city and charging an admission fee and seeing the revenues increase? Because we charge a admission fee for the Chinese garden, and I see, whether we lump it together as like a $15 admission charge for both or something along those lines.
I understand the issue has been thoroughly explored already, and a decision was made not to go down the admission fee route. What we try very hard to do at the museum is to drive our visitors to the garden to get some revenue at the garden. We've just recently revamped our internal map, which shows that the visit at the museum continues to the garden. We very much encourage people to get to the garden. And again, our targets at the museum are to get our revenue from our cafe lease, from our retail, from our research fees, our photocopying and our photographic reproduction charges.
Okay,
There's
so,
quite a lot of scope to get money from those areas.
right, so I'm just looking at the actuals from last year. 13-14, we had 268,000 go through Toyota, and you had 31,000 continue through. So are you thinking that you can get it more on a greater ratio that way?
Yes, it's a tricky one because it's such a long way from our front door to the garden. What we have to do is allow people to know that if they go through our front door and out the back door that they are at the garden. A lot of people go back out to the front and then they're a long way from the garden. So we're trying hard to make it a continuous visit. You come in the front door, you'll be encouraged to visit the garden at the end of the museum. But a lot again with Toitu, it's a very intense visit. After people have come in and spent a couple of hours wandering around, they don't necessarily want to do something else. And it's very hard to do the museum in 20 minutes, half an hour, and then go do something else. So we're working with that, but our aim is certainly to convert museum visitors into garden visitors. They're not necessarily the same group of people. But again, what we do is encourage our staff to visit the garden themselves and then be able to encourage people to go through.
Okay, and slightly different question. How do you see using Gigatown and the technology from that at the museum?
Oh, now we had a Gigatown discussion last week with one of the Gigatown providers in town. The issue around Gigatown for us apparently is we can provide, we've got free Wi-Fi now, we can do free Wi-Fi that is gigaspeed free Wi-Fi, but the big thing about Gigatown is content. There's no point giving people gigaspeed and there's not enough content for people to be able to download or stream or whatever. So what we're looking at doing is installing some more webcams. So that people can actually have a look at the garden through a really, like an HD, very high quality webcam, and we can stream that live. We're also looking at putting decent webcam with sound into our lecture theatre so that we can stream every one of our public programs. Because we're a cultural institution, we can provide that content HD, interesting, we can live stream things and then store them so people can download them later. And that for us is our niche market. We're also considering whether we can make a space where we can encourage people to create creative content.
Thank you.
Councillor Thompson.
Look, so I'm just going back to a question that Councillor Calvert asked. I just apologise, I'm getting tired, so I may have just misheard the answer or whatever. But the 59% is the residents' opinion survey result. We have no idea whether the people responding that have ever been inside the Chinese garden, correct?
I'm pretty sure the residents' opinion survey is taken of those people who have visited. I'll stand to be corrected on that one, but I'm pretty sure the resident opinion survey is of those people who have ticked the box to say they have visited. Yes, it's correct, yeah.
And the 93% the year before, though, was from an actual visitor satisfaction survey. Is that correct?
No, that was residents' opinion survey.
Both. So so it says visitor satisfaction survey from 2011-12. Data source.
That we've always used the residents' opinion survey for that. I can check how that's. Chinese garden may well be before our time running it. I'd have to go back and check.
No, that's what it was. It's the Chinese garden I'm talking about.
Oh, sorry, yeah.
I'm just concerned that we may be, in fact, comparing two completely different measures here and saying that one's gone, that we've gone down when we've got two completely different data sources.
Again, I can go back and check that and see if we have always asked that question in the residents' opinion survey. It might be that we haven't asked that question before, whether we have always visited, but we can go back and check that.
Well, I'm not sure that's what I'm saying. I'm questioning the data source. It says visitor satisfaction survey from 2011-12. It doesn't say residents' opinion survey from 2011-12, and then it specifically puts residents' opinion survey after the 13-14 figure, which suggests to me that there's a difference.
Richard, unfortunately that's a typo. I've just realised that looking at the numbers, say residents' opinion survey.
So it is actually the same measure each year.
Yeah, except, and I need to change the information to 93% because if we use the residence opinion survey, I can't show that result because it's not the same graph
Thank
set.
you, Mr. Sol.
So sorry about that.
All right, I think that's... Thank you very much. Now, those are the two items that we committed to getting done today. We were in the middle of sport, recreation and leisure, and we have the next thing in that section is the Surf Life Saving New Zealand Regional Lifeguard Service report. We've got a quarter of an hour. Andrew's here? Yep.
Let's go for it.
So we'll embark on that. And we'll see how far we get. I'm sorry to have you guys up and down and waiting. This is on 18.9.1. So, questions, councillors?
I've asked mine, they've been answered.
Councillor Hawkins, you have a question?
It may well be the same question. Would the level of funding for Surf Life Saving New Zealand not be decided by the grants subcommittee?
It would.
Thanks.
It should. It should.
So, maybe to move that the report is noted.
Second.
Right, any further questions?
Seconded and voted on.
Someone move this recommendation? Oh, sorry, I missed that. Move Councillor Hawkins, seconded
McTavish.
Tavish.
Aye.
Any discussion? I'll put it all those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. I'd like to take the feeling of the meeting now. The next item on the agenda is the Otago Cricket Association lighting proposal. We have 12 minutes and I'm intending to knock off pretty much on 5 or shortly thereafter. What is the feeling of the meeting? Should we start on this or should we just wait till Monday?
Your Worship, can I just ask, Richard has been sitting here all day. I'm wondering if there are any other issues that he is involved in, and I think that there are just two administrative matters. Are you Otago Cricket as well? No. So there's just planning and parks and reserves and the admin side of that, and then that's it. Yeah. Yeah.
So that's a good point. So Parks and Reserves on that same page, Parks and Reserves 16.24 and 16.32.
I'd be happy with that because I think the Cricket Association one really does need some discussion.
Yes.
Certainly.
This is my feeling.
The same way they did the last one.
This is my feeling. I didn't want to play that one. So we'll do these two lines and then we'll call it a day, I think. So, folks, 16.24 Parks and Reserves questions.
Question, Your Worship.
Councillor Noon.
Probably for Lisa. The overall thrust of the budgets, and we heard from the Chief Executive at the front end, was about maintaining the current level of service across the city. The question is around Parks and Reserves. Lisa, are you confident that the budgets are adequate to maintain the current level of service? service, sorry, can I get the word out?
If I can, through the chair, over the last 2 years we have been trying to make as many savings as we can. We've got the budget at a stage where we are trying to achieve maintaining what we have at the moment with the budget that we've put up. If that helps clarify that question.
If I can just add on the level of confidence, I mean, we've put forward a budget which we believe we can maintain the level of service. There are some areas we're struggling in because they depend on the amount of things that other people do in terms of vandalism and so forth, you know, things that we don't have a lot of control over. But this budget really is probably the most comfortable line that we've got in terms of delivering that level of service with the savings that have been achieved.
Well, I suppose that helps to, I suppose, flesh out my concerns to, I suppose, to elaborate. Are you confident that you have the ability to deal with issues that will pop up from time to time in the parks and reserves area? So I'll just cut to the chase. You know, you take Watson Park, for example. The drainage issue needs to be dealt with because there is a stormwater drain that's collapsed. Now, if staff continue to maintain the surface at the top, as per, you know, the asset management plans, there doesn't seem to be any point in spending money at the top when your drainage isn't working. So the other sorts of things I'm trying to refer to make sure that you have some slop in your budget to be able to deal with these things.
If I may, through the chair, no, there isn't any flexibility in the budget to deal with those, but where we do have assets, existing assets, we do have renewal programs in place to be able to manage that, and we can reprioritise the work to try and identify the ones that need to be addressed most urgently. In respect to some of the sports field areas, there is some work still going on that will help us reprioritise and identify the levels of service across the board anyway, and we're just waiting to complete that work before we actually start spending money in that area to make sure that we've got the right priorities and putting the funding in the best place that we can.
I've just highlighted one situation and I'm aware of others around the city, and that's really why I'm flagging.
I can repeat though, I mean, these things will happen. I mean, we've had, as you said, there's an asset failure there, some of which wasn't anticipated within the life cycle. So there will be a reprioritisation, so something will drop off and that will just have to be flagged up, but it will be prioritised on the basis of getting the best level of service to maintain the level of service. In terms of your description before, no, we do not have lumps of contingency sums in budgets.
Councillor McTavish.
Oh, look, I think it's been covered. I just wondered, Mick and Lisa, whether or not you wanted to briefly cover off what we discussed the other day in terms of where we were hoping to be at this time next year in relation to understanding the outcomes that we're getting for the degree of investment that we are putting in and how that ties into the Parks and Rec strategy.
If I may, through the chair, Councillor McTavish is referring to a lot of work that's going to get underway for the living asset space. There has been a number of reports that have been done in the past, particularly around providing us a long-term program of works for the town belt and in some of our coastal dune reserve works. Those reports need to be redone and re-energised. And once those, and actually look at the coastal line and see what's happening in the erosion around those areas as well. Look at our planting programs, make sure that we're achieving the results we're trying to achieve. Once we've got that body of work in place, and we do have funding there to achieve those within this current and going into the next financial year, that will give us a long-term plan to achieve a lot of our conservation and biodiversity works that we want to try and achieve.
Councillor Thompson.
I think it's quite a different situation from the one I raised earlier with cemeteries and crematorium, but I'd still like to understand it, and that's just the reserve here, and we've got funds going to the reserve and funds coming from the reserve. And
It's parks and reserves.
no, this is financial reserve. I'm on page 1626. So, well, 1617, for example, there's $100,000 coming in from reserve, and the same year there's $210,000 being paid out to reserve.
If I could ask Financial Analyst Laurie to comment on that, please.
Through you, Your Worship. Those transfers to and from reserves in this activity are primarily related to development contributions and Mosgiel development, Mosgiel East. There's also, there is some allowance in there for transfers to reserve for money received from forest harvesting, as well as transfers coming out of reserves to pay for that. So mainly it's development contributions.
So when we're those reserves, if they're primarily coming from development contributions, are they quite targeted in terms of what they can be used for?
Very targeted, yes.
Any further questions? Councillor White.
Based on everything we heard from Otago Soccer last year and rugby about the sports grounds and the Brighton domain and the, I'm sorry, what was it, the park? Watson Park. And looking at how you're positioning some of this funding over the course of the 10 years, is there not a need to bring some of it forward and get the work done a little quicker?
If I may, through the Chair, 2 years ago we removed all of the capital works programs for sports fields, and part of that reason was it was the tail end of a 10-year upgrade program that had been pushed out and pushed out and pushed out, and they didn't necessarily represent the top priorities anymore. So the work that is happening at the moment with support and assistance through Sport Otago is helping us to refocus and prioritise the work that we need to do in that space. I'd really want to wait until that work is done before we start looking at any major upgrades to sports grounds, so that I'm confident and you're confident that we're spending it in the right place.
Good to hear. And looking at Logan Park, is that a similar sort of process working with Sport Otago? Logan Park development, I see there's $3 million down the line.
If I may, through the Chair, Sport Otago are one factor, but there's a wider stakeholder group that's investing some thought going into that process.
Further questions? That's that final. No, that's where are we? Let's see. Is the 16.32 Parks and Reserves Administration is the last line. Any questions on that? Councillor Beatson. No, doesn't seem to be. Thank you all. That's those two bits finished. So the remaining report in that section is the Otago Cricket Association lighting proposal report, and we will pick that up first thing on Monday morning. Good morning, councillors, and we'll get underway again. Bit of deja vu after a weekend of reasonably controversial cricket, from just looking at the emails that are floating around. Anyway, so we'll move on, and in that vein, the first item on our agenda is indeed the Otago Cricket Association lighting proposal for the University of Otago Oval, which is on pages 18.10.1 onwards. Morning. would you like to kick off, or do you want to just go into questions or questions? So, councillors, can I invite questions in the first instance? Councillor Benson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't know who this, to whom this is addressed, but I've a number of questions about the previous council commitment to the ground, and specifically the cost of refurbishment of the stand, and the cost of any groundworks that have already been done, embankments and so on, 2 lots of tree removal, and the cost of the modifications of the Sargal Centre to accommodate the reorientation of the ground. I wonder if you can give us a ballpark figure for each and all of those, please.
Okay, through the chair, about 13, 14 years ago, when the major project of refurbishment was completed, my understanding, there's not exact figures, my understanding that the project was around $6 to $7 million. Subsequent to that, 2004, 2009, we have figures of $5 million. There's an ongoing. We can provide details of these. Some of the things that you mentioned, such as the tree work, were dealt with operationally. The last removal of trees, which was $30,000, we're sure about. Others are part of a program for a long-term program, which is being reassessed now for replacing and rejuvenating trees around there. So that may be a little more difficult. Purchasing the screens, the money spent on the training wickets, the extension of the actual ground to meet New Zealand cricket specifications, which also involve cutting the end off modifying the end of the art gallery to extend some time ago. Those figures are all available. I can get them circulated as closely as possible to councillors if they will be of use. But the indication that we're talking in the region of 3 to 4 million over a period of time. Thank you. We would have to isolate them in financials.
I don't really want the specific detail. I'm just trying to get a broad brush, better understanding of the situation. And as a result of all that work, the university built the new building behind the refurbished stand, I understand. We understand, and there's some naming rights from the Takatari Times, what's the lease arrangement for the stand and the rooms above it? And how much do cricket pay for that?
Once again, we'd have to get back to you with the exact figure on the.
I think
the annex, as you say, is owned by the university, and of course we have a deed of agreement with the university for the way that the university overall is managed to run and their access to it. It's not being used for cricket.
But they did gift it to us. That's correct, isn't it?
And part of that gift. Not the annex, but the grandstand and the university oval, and that's what the deed of agreement is. It specifies the responsibilities of each party, and anything that happens on the university oval, and we've done so recently with the proposals from cricket, we have to confer with the university and take on board their wishes in respect to coming back to council and asking for any approvals. They basically have to approve. They work closely with the University Rugby Club, of they have a traditional interest, but our council's primary partner in their arrangement with our deed of agreement is the university.
Okay.
Councillor Bazet.
Yeah, the Otago University Rugby Club, they have their club rooms there, and they use the ground for club rugby during the winter months?
The answer is yes. If you've got any details of, it's not just the University Oval, of course. I mean, there are 2 adjacent grounds 4 and 5. There used to be 1 and 2 where the Highlanders practice, but as part under the deed of agreement and the supplementary deed, which has now been finally agreed and signed off, there are substitute areas. So there are, I guess, rights of use and priority for use for the University Rugby Club under our agreement with the university.
So while this, for our purposes for the annual plan, today we're considering an approach from the Otago Cricket Association, clearly there will be other beneficiaries if lights are installed down there. Not only the University Rugby Club, but there'll be others as well that will be able to use that ground for nighttime entertainment apart from rugby and cricket.
If I can, Chair, Lisa, the Parks Manager and I have met since the annual plan meetings last year with the university and been through the proposal with them, and they've come back to us with their feedback, which we discussed with Ross Dykes quite recently. We have no indication, there's been no comment to us or statement to us about benefit from that. I'm not saying there won't be, but they haven't made a point of that. Their concern mostly was with the any encroachment on Logan Park Drive by extending the embankment over Logan Park Drive. We've been back to the cricket, and as I said, we met with Ross Dykes last week and went through a number of issues so that we all had clarity on that, and that was achieved very satisfactorily.
So I've got a couple of other questions. The other one was this approach from the Otago Cricket Association. Has there been any council input into that at all? Is that just the Cricket Association come to the DCC and said, we want you to consider this in the annual plan? We haven't had officers sitting down with them looking at the requests that they've made and perhaps couching in a way that it might be more acceptable to council.
If I can, let's herself and head staff discussing the proposals and the feasibility and difficulties and potential issues with some of those. Not with a view of working together on making it happen, but us looking at the proposal and making comment on where substantial changes are needed. And as I said, as of last week, going back to cricket and looking at the umbrella that they're having to work under, which are the specifications in New Zealand cricket, and saying, does your proposal, are they under that proposal that was put to council last year, do we really need to do that to meet that specification? Is there an alternative? And looking at some of those alternatives, but not in respect to the lights. That appears to be a very definite requirement, and they do not appear to us anyway, without having any technical knowledge, be in any way around that. It's quite a clear specification. The lights need, at a certain time, need to be in place by a certain time.
Councillor Noon.
Thank you, Worship. Mick, you mentioned that you'd recently met with Ross Dykes a week or two ago or whatever, and I'm just wondering about their fundraising plan, which the report suggests they really haven't done a great deal. Obviously they've discussed the proposal with the cricketing fraternity, but in terms of runs on the board, excuse the pun, in finance from a fundraising point of view, there are no runs on the board, is that correct? And the second part of the question is it essential for the project to proceed to have the city as a key funder?
Through the Chair, my understanding is Otago Cricket last year, after their annual plan submission, did make some initial inquiries with community funders such as Community Trust, and obviously there's been a lot of discussion, as you mentioned, through the cricket fraternity, but my understanding is they don't have any significant funding set aside for this, and without significant, I guess at the present, as it currently stands, without significant support from council, they would be very much struggling to achieve this project.
I think in answer to both of those questions, just to put it in context, the Otago Cricket Association came to see me in the company of the New Zealand Cricket Council, or whatever they call themselves, Cricket New Zealand, and just outlined the needs for lights going forward in the context of the tests that are coming to the city, etc. And I know that there was also some interaction between Otago Cricket and the Chief Executive and the Stadium Chief Executive over hiring the seats and the financials all around that. My suggestion to them when they came to me was that this was the appropriate place to bring up any proposal, and I think the premise underlying, this goes to the heart of your question, I think, Councillor Noon, that the premise underlying where else resource might come from was that it wasn't necessarily the council that would have to come from. There was a certain price for the lights, and they didn't feel that was feasible for them to think that they could raise all of that, whatever it is, 2.5 million or whatever, in the time frame that they want. But that didn't mean it had to be council who funded it, but they did come to the conclusion that in the long run it would be appropriate for council to own them. Now, however, that was achieved, and so that is the basis for them coming here with this particular proposal. That's the context from my point of view.
So that just raises another question with regards to if council were of a mind to support in some shape or form, by the sound of it, the timing of that support could well be further down the track, or significantly further down the track rather than...
I think that's in council's hands.
Yeah.
Councillor Pete.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just following some of your comments and Councillor Benton Pope, so I'm just wondering if you could clarify for us who owns the assets at the University Oval, in the sense of the stand, the other things there, the board, the fencing.
If I may, through the Chair, all of the assets that are based down there are owned by the council.
Would it therefore be anomalous for us to think that the Cricket Association would pay for and own the lights for this facility?
If I can, Chair, I'm not sure about anomalous. It would be a change in practice. I guess the most significant indicator to me would be the purchase of the screens, the site screens, which was a similar negotiation some years ago, whether the screens were identified and preliminary procurement was undertaken by Cricket, making sure that they were available and that the people wanted to sell them. And the arrangements were solely based on the assets being owned by council. So I guess a precedent and a pattern is there. I'm not sure if it will be anomalous to break it, but it will be a case of private ownership on public, for use of public land. I see no reason why it couldn't be done, but it would be a change of style, if I can put it that way.
And in terms of negotiating a kind of a rental when there are night games there would have to be quite a bit of hard negotiation about it. Because the Cricket Association would own lights versus, there being our lights. So I can imagine it becomes a bit messy.
If I may, through the Chair, obviously looking at that level of detail, we're still working through with Otago Cricket at the moment. We're reviewing our service level agreement with them, and any ODI or test matches will have to reflect the cost that we charge for those, for the venue hire. We'll have to allow for an additional charge for lights depending on the ownership and then the running costs of those as well. But definitely we'll be looking at incorporating those in if they become a council asset.
But if I can just follow up on that, just understanding the question. If there were a different ownership regime in place where the lights weren't owned by council and there wasn't perhaps a requirement for debt servicing, which would of course becomes a cost against the Parks Department, then that negotiated rental would probably reflect that, because there would be less in-house costs for council to have to recover from the rental. But that hasn't been, we haven't done that exercise yet.
Yeah, okay. I understand from the paper that the Target Cricket Association is proposing to pay for 20% of the capital cost of the lights and their installation. Is that true? And has the Cricket Association shown any doubt about their ability to raise $500,000?
Just through the Chair, for a point of clarity, some of the costs that we received from the Target Cricket for the supply and install of the lights was $2 million, but that did exclude costs with consents, trenching, project contingency, and any costs associated with power capacity. So for that reason, we've allowed for an extra $500,000 in the total project to make it 2.5. And Cricket have communicated their confidence to fundraise for the costs over and above the $2 million for the supply and install the lights. So it's all the additional costs. I haven't seen a fundraising plan, but they have articulated their confidence in fundraising $500,000.
Thank you, that's good. Just in terms of benefits for the city, I mean, clearly they're proposing something that would benefit their sport. But benefits for the city, I wondered, in an interest of what's been referred to before in this long-term plan process of cross-department analysis, I wondered whether you'd considered anything to do with the economic benefit to the city and the hospitality and tourism industry, and not you, but whether the economic development, the marketing department, venture, Dunedin and so on, so Enterprise Dunedin rather. Have you had any conversations with them?
There's certainly been conversations. I know that the relevant people in Enterprise Dunedin now are connected with this as another proposal which offers potential economic benefit to Dunedin, both in dollars and I guess and in profile, as they say these days. Yeah, I know that people are. And in the strategic planning exercise which staff conducted, there was certainly staff there, and they made a very positive indication that they saw benefits.
Your Worship, I see John Christie's here with us today, and I just wondered if he might have a comment about the benefits to the city.
It's relevant, yeah. John.
Through you, Your Worship. We certainly do see that there is some economic benefit from holding test matches in the city. We know from rugby that economic impact assessment reports are conducted that show that there is a positive benefit, and certainly when it comes to the coverage that you get with cricket in particular around a worldwide audience, it does give you a significant profile for the city. I'm not aware of any particular economic impact reports that have been done on cricket, but it would be something that we could certainly pursue a little bit further.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Councillor Thompson.
The major domestic competition in terms of public interest now is quite clearly the 2020 cricket. I think this is the case, but I wonder if you can confirm that Otago played no home games in that competition this year because of the absence of lights.
If I may, through the Chair, I can't confirm that, but there has been some changes to the schedule of where they played due to the amount of works that were put into preparing for the Cricket World Cup and the 2 ODIs that we've just held. 2020s have been played down here. We've had one instance where lights were brought in from the United States by New Zealand Cricket as a test to see how 2020 would play across New Zealand under lights. They would benefit from lights here, but they do. At the moment, we get enough light still in February, March for 2020s to be able to be played without lights.
Yeah, I don't think that's my question with respect, though. My question is around what actually happens, whether it's climatically possible. My understanding, and I'm open to correction, but my understanding is that we played all of our home games in the North Island this year at a ground under lights because Sky TV required that all the games be played in the evening. I'm seeking confirmation that that's the case, but I think that it is.
I can perhaps add some confirmation of that from what I've gleaned from the report and from conversations with Otago Cricket and New Zealand Cricket, and their focus was more on tests and the television needs of an international audience across different time zones, and the emphasis that they put on it was on the need for lights was more around tests in that regard. I don't know how much it applies to the local competition as well, but certainly the focus whenever I've had a conversation with them has been on the need for day-night games for an international audience. Councillor McTavish.
I've got 3 questions. The first is just around discussions with the Otago University. It seems to me that the major beneficiary of any international profile that the sport might get when it's played in Dunedin is the University of Otago, given that the Oval holds its name. Are you aware of any discussions that Otago Cricket might have had with the university to assist with any fundraising?
Okay, through the Chair, that hasn't been discussed in any meetings that myself or staff have been at, but there again, the meetings that we've been at weren't around, I guess, the wider issues of what Otago Cricket were doing in terms of fundraising. They were about the practicalities and feasibility of, I guess, works on the ground and meeting any the specifications from New Zealand Cricket. So I can't say that those wouldn't have taken place, but not to myself and the staff have been involved in at our level.
Thank you. Just in relation to, I guess, previous experiences around funding models, I'm just wondering if any of you can recall how the lights were funded, which originally went in at Carisbrook when that was a DCC asset.
Just through the Chair, point of clarification. My understanding is that Delta actually owned the lights at Carisbrook and they were leased to the Otago Rugby Football Union. So it wasn't an asset that council owned, other than through its trading company. In terms of how that was achieved, I don't have any knowledge. Mick may have comment. But
So I'd have to refer to, I guess, staff from the Finance Department to confirm on that one.
And I guess, sorry, a follow-up question to that. Are you aware of any conversations that Otago Cricket might have had with Delta about a possible funding arrangement given their history?
If I can, just to be clear, we're talking about the time lately or before, when the lights were disposed of?
In relation to this proposal?
No, not in relation to this.
And my final question is just, and maybe more appropriately put to Grant, Mr Mackenzie, but the question is just around this particular funding proposal. It strikes me that we usually draw down capital at the point that we start a capital project, and that is used in order to put the proposal in place, as it were, to build the asset, and then it is paid off over a 20-year, usually 20-year time frame after that. This appears to be a different approach, whereby the capital is not drawn down until about 3 years after the asset is actually put in place. And I'm just wondering whether you have any comment, Grant, on firstly how orthodox that is, and secondly how comfortable you would be if that became a standard approach for council.
So effectively, all you're doing here is delaying the raising of the debt for this particular issue, and then you'll transfer the assets at that date. So effectively, you're buying a second-hand lights. which is no better or worse than buying them brand new. So it's not normal, but I could also see instances where it would be completely appropriate. Can I just follow up on one question Councillor Thompson asked? I've just checked the Bolt's website, and I think they had one game in Dunedin last year, which was in late November. All the others have been out of the city, which is unusual. So, sorry, does that answer your question?
Councillor Vincent Pope.
Thank you. Two things. The first one is in relation to the drivers for this proposal, which we see in the paper as essentially the desire for night games to be available in other viewing areas. Is there any suggestion that there's going to be any revenue coming from the people who make the money out of those activities, predominantly cricket itself, presumably, but most significantly the TV provider, Sky? I mean, if the proposal is that there's a facility added to the ground so that they can broadcast on the subcontinent, what contribution do they make to having that extra TV time access?
Okay, through the chair, all the arrangements with the media, with Sky in particular, are through directly between them and cricket. The councils, my department's arrangements and council's arrangements for use of the ground and rental are with cricket.
Okay, and the second question is in relation to the quantum that we're talking about. I, like Councillor Peake, I think, understood this to be 2.5 million, of which cricket's going to raise 500. But in fact, you're telling us that in fact the project cost is 2 million and there's an additional amount as yet unspecified in respect of consents or power or whatever, and cricket have said they'll pick that up. So it's actually worse than is presented in the paper in terms of their contribution, minimal as it is.
In terms of cost, that's correct. So we've allowed for an extra $500,000 costs that aren't factored in essentially the quote that cricket have received.
But cricket aren't coming and saying we'll raise 20%. They're saying, oh well, if it goes over 2 million, you're going to buy these, thank you very much anyway, but we'll pick up the slop beyond that.
Correct. Essentially, cricket have said that they will fundraise for the costs over and above the 2 million, and they would be seeking, as per the paper, the financial support from council for the $2 million.
Up to a certain amount or just unspecified? So if it costs 3 million, they'd pay 1?
With the time frame that they've proposed, they've said they could fundraise up to $500,000.
Councillor Kelvin.
The current state of cricket here in the way of funding from games, the proposal here is that we would be paid more than we're currently being paid, and I would like what we were sent in the way of a table to be put in the public domain. Is that a possibility?
I wasn't aware that there was something that wasn't.
We were sent an answer to some questions. We were given a table that made it clearer what effect it had on council. And since we've all seen that, it seems to me appropriate that.
There's no reason why it shouldn't be.
In that suggests that the income we get if we had a test match allocated would be 34,800 or so, and that currently it's 8,700, and that likewise if we had an ODI match that we wouldn't be getting otherwise, it would be 30,500. So suggesting a much bigger income for cricket as a result of putting the lights in. What I'd like to know is, currently, is cricket covering its cost with its income? Currently, is it likely you can put the price of the tickets up by that amount by having lights? Is there any relationship between the income they're likely to get at matches and the amount that we're going to be charging under this proposal? Sorry, that might not be a clear question.
I think the elements of it are clear. I'm just putting it together in my head. If the question was, is the recovery through income from cricket, does that cover the costs of cricket? The answer is no. No sport is covered in that way. The costs of maintaining cricket are, I think it's fair to say, amongst the highest costs for sport, because simply the nature of the field and the quality of the field that's required. For the calibre of matches that are required to meet the specifications on the University Oval, they are high. They won't be met from income, not to the income to the DCC.
Yeah, so increasing the charge we make to them per game is just going to increase their losses. It's not. How are they going to cover it? Is there any?
That would have to be discussed with the Otago Cricket. We're not privy to their losses and gains, but the indication we have is they struggle to maintain themselves. They have a relationship with New Zealand Cricket that they have to meet and other providers. But that's anecdotal. I don't have that information to you.
I think I might be able to enlighten you a little bit. When the games that we're talking about are international games, and my understanding is that Otago Cricket or any regional cricket will negotiate with New Zealand Cricket to cover the venue hire cost. So it doesn't necessarily mean that that they incur the direct cost of the venue hire at a regional level, unless they have other local games and they have a bit more control over the ticket hire for games outside of international games. Does that help a little bit?
Yes, it does a wee bit, but we would want to know more about whether that they can negotiate with somebody who then negotiates with Sky, and as Councillor Benson Pope said, maybe the benefit's going at one end and we're definitely significantly at the other, it seems to me, and we can't know the bit in the middle without Otago Cricket coming and giving us some sort of idea. Was that?
Just a comment through the Chair. In preparation of this report, with communication with Ross Dykes, I did ask what would be some reasonable and fair fee ground usage charges, and they are reflected in the report. So the $40,000 including GST for a test match and the $35,000 for an ODI. And New Zealand Cricket did confirm that they would be reasonable, but in part contingent on having the capacity of 6,000. And also it depends on how the tours and games are allocated across the country as well. So for example, Dunedin wouldn't necessarily always get Australia or England or India, depending on how the games are going to be allocated across the country. So I guess what I'm saying, all those factors would impact on the ability to pay an increased fee over and above what's stated in the report.
Do we have any idea the cost of hiring lights for these games? Since an experiment's been done, introducing them, borrowing them from America or whatever?
Through the Chair, the light hires that I referred to before was funded by New Zealand Cricket. We've never been given any details as to what the actual costs were, just that they were very, very high and probably not economical on an ongoing basis to rent them. Whether or not there are access to lights within New Zealand or Australia to be able to hire, I'm not aware of that at this stage.
Just to the Chair, one other comment. My understanding is that those lights were also moved to other grounds around New Zealand that didn't have them, for example in Christchurch. So if Christchurch installs lights in the future, then that cost of temporary lights, if they were to be brought in from America, would be applied to just the grounds that would require them, therefore meaning potentially an increased cost if Dunedin was the only place without lights and had to have temporary ones.
If I can, this will have to be verified with Otago Cricket, New Zealand Cricket, but my understanding is that and I think the word was used before, that the bringing in of the temporary lights from America was an experiment. It was, I guess, part of a diligence procedure to test out the feasibility of using such lights on that basis for introducing those type of games in New Zealand. And my reading of that and my understanding from that is that it wasn't feasible, and that is why New Zealand Cricket is trying to encourage and provide encouragement for permanent lights to be put in place at key grounds in New Zealand. That's my understanding.
So am I right that with these figures we've got, they'd have to be about over 250,000 a year to hire for a couple of games to be unfeasible compared with this option? Because this is costing 250,000 more per year or something than the current cost. So that's the amount of money that we would have to play with to choose the cheapest option per annum. So that would be a hiring cost which would be equivalent. Is that, have I missed something out here? Or?
Through the Chair, that's correct. We did ask Ross Dyke these questions when we met a couple of weeks ago, and he was very clear that New Zealand Cricket's appetite for temporary lights is not high because of the issues associated with them. In particular, movement of the lights in the wind can create quite a few issues, and from discussions with Ross, there were 2 domestic games cancelled because of issues in wind. I do appreciate that might not have been in Dunedin though, so the wind factor may not be as great as some other areas, but wind does play a significant factor with having the temporary lights. So in short, I'm not sure how palatable New Zealand Cricket would be to be using temporary lights on a permanent basis into the future.
Councillor Vanders.
Sorry, is it Hamish?
Yes.
Yeah, pardon me. I just wanted to add a little bit to the answer you gave to Councillor McTavish regarding the Carisbrook lights. When I was first elected, I went to some trouble to find out about how they came to be in Delta's possession. And the background of those was that the ORFU bought the lights in the first place. They paid over $1 million for them, for those Carisbrook lights. The reason at the time they had to be so expensive was that they had to meet the higher demands of cricket lighting than was required for rugby, but in those days cricket and rugby were talking to each other a bit more, and the ORFU bought the lights. The then Mayor said, and I was interested to hear Mayor Cull say something similar now, that it was appropriate for council to own the lights by way of Waipori in those days, simply because the lights consumed so much electricity.
Can I just correct it? I didn't say that it was appropriate. I said that they believed that it was appropriate that council owned the asset. I didn't say I was reporting their belief.
Okay. So you said they believe that it was appropriate for council to own them. Right. The word appropriate for council to own has come up a few times here, and I'm just saying that there is a history of it, that it was believed that it was appropriate for council to own the Carisbrook lights because they used so much power. Waipori actually owned them, and Delta came to come into ownership of them when Waipori was sold. Delta then picked up the asset. I tried to find out from Chief Executive John Walsh how much was paid by Delta for these more than $1 million worth of lights. I tried very hard for a long time and was stonewalled constantly, because since then the ORFU were simply paying a rental based on the value that Delta had paid for them, which I understood to be a token amount.
Councillor Vanders, we're in question time, and I appreciate your extensive knowledge, but I'm not sure how much of this is relevant. So can you get to a question, please?
The relevance is that we seem to be going through a similar situation now regarding ownership, regarding how things are paid for. My first question really is for Mr. Black. You said that you haven't seen Otago Cricket's fundraising plan. Has anyone seen Otago Cricket's fundraising plan that's here? I'm a bit concerned given the history of Otago Bowls, Otago ice skating, etc. Has anyone seen the Otago Cricket's fundraising plan for this $500,000?
Through the Chair, in terms of staff, no, there's been no written document communicated to staff with a fundraising plan. There's obviously been mentioned in meetings, but we've not seen a fundraising plan.
Have you asked to see their fundraising plan? Do you know, in fact, if they have a fundraising plan?
Through the Chair, we don't know if they have a fundraising plan. We've been making sure that they're very clear on the message that fundraising would be required, but they haven't been forthcoming with any written document that shows what their plan is. They have communicated that they've spoken to some funders last year, but in terms of applications and going to that extent, we haven't been made aware.
The Carisbrook lights that have recently been disposed of by Delta, well, when I say recently, it's a year or so ago now that the Carisbrook lights were sold, I believe, to Christchurch. They were a cricket specification light. Was it ever looked at to actually use those lights, given that Delta owned them and had acquired them extremely cheaply post the sale of Waipori?
Mr. Vogt, can Your Worship, I'll try and answer that. I won't be able to answer it completely. I know that it was discussed. To what depth it was discussed, I wasn't party to, so I can't comment further. I know there were issues to do with the need to spend so much on lights and University Oval at that time, because the plans at that time didn't include. There was no perceived need for lighting of that quality or strength in terms for the uses of the Oval. There were some issues to do with the consenting, but I don't know the details of those.
So what you're confirming, in fact, is that the lights that were relatively recently disposed of by Delta, and I understand at a mere fraction of their cost, that were certainly in the past suitable for cricket, that they were not looked at as an option for the University Oval because they didn't see the need a year or so ago for them.
What I will confirm is I know they were looked at, but they weren't considered considered either necessary or value at that time. The reasons for that I don't know. I wasn't involved in those negotiations. That would have to be something that would have to be some research on.
Mr. Avery.
These are very valid questions, but I don't think staff are able to answer them. They are questions that should be put to New Zealand Cricket. All we have in front of you is a report that tries to identify the request from the Cricket Association. We're not warranting that the information that they've provided, it's their information, it's not our information, it's trying to put something in front of you as much as we know. I don't think that Mr. Rees, despite his best efforts, can actually give you a decent answer to the questions that you're asking because they weren't in our area of responsibility. So what you have in front of you is as much information as we have about what they're asking for from the Council. In terms of what happened previously, I think they are questions that should probably be directed to New Zealand Cricket or the Otago Cricket Association rather than staff attempting to try and answer them.
I think that's a good point. I think there are a number of questions here that, just took a little note, that would be appropriate to ask of New Zealand Cricket because they involve their business case or whatever, which we wouldn't expect staff to know. They're nonetheless valid questions, but I can shed some light, no pun intended, on one of your questions with regard to the lights. My understanding that I gained from a conversation yesterday is that whilst the stands for those lights would be useful, the actual lights themselves are now out of date in terms of both operating cost and contemporary technology. So they would be expensive to run, and if you were putting in new lights now, that's not the ones you would buy. That's
if you were putting in new lights now, right? Okay, so I wasn't suggesting that we actually should have asked Otago Cricket necessarily. I was suggesting that we should have asked our own company, controlled company, which is Delta, who had the lights, who knew how much power they consumed, who knew what they were good for, who knew what the specification was, and who sold them relatively recently, I believe, to Christchurch when...
Councillor Davis, this is not about Delta. There's no responsibility in the context of this report for Delta to do anything. They're not involved. So please conclude your questions, if you would.
My question is, given that there is a demonstrable need for lighting now at the University Oval, and that our council-owned company very recently had possession of lights which may have been useful, you suggested at least the towers were useful even if the bulbs had to be upgraded, I would have liked to have thought that we would have had some information regarding what happened there and why that wasn't an option and why we're going for the expensive new option here.
Because it's, as I've just pointed out, it's nothing to do with Delta. This is a request from Otago Cricket. Delta is not involved in it. So we'll move on. Councillor Noon.
Sorry, I hadn't finished my questions.
Well, could you please ask one?
On page 181034, it says in the second bottom paragraph that irrespective of proposed lighting developments, fees and charges for the use of the University of Otago Oval need to be reviewed for all codes. Why is it that needs to be reviewed now? It says here, irrespective of the lights, all these fees and charges for the use of the University Oval needs to be reviewed for all codes. Why is that need arisen now? It's irrespective of the lights.
If I may, through the chair, it has been identified in this report as targeting the University Oval, but it is an exercise that we do from time to time across all of the city and all of our sporting codes to refresh and review the fees and charges policy, and that is on the plan to be done over the next 12 months.
But you don't give a reason for it needing to be done now? Is it just that it comes up every few years that you review these things? It just happens to be now? Nothing to do with the lighting?
Correct, yeah, just coincides. Just means that because we're aware of the lighting, that it's another factor that we can build in if we wish to, as far as being able to generate additional revenue for casual use of people that want to hire the facility.
Thank you. Thank you.
Councillor Noon.
Thank you, Your Worship. My question is just around the hockey turf lights. Do we own those lights?
Through the chair, no, we don't. Otago Hockey owns those lights.
Okay, I don't need to ask my second question.
Councillor Thompson.
Just my questions to Grant. Councillor McTavish has already asked a question with regard to, is it an appropriate way to go about it from a capital raising perspective? My question is similar. It strikes me this is a particularly messy proposal. In your view, are there, if council were to proceed, and I'm not presupposing they will, but if they were to proceed, is this a sensible way to go about it, or would it be far more sensible to do it in a much cleaner way?
My preference is a cleaner way, because effectively what you've got here is that they're taking on the debt for 2 years, which we're not taking on. Then we have to take that effectively that debt on. They're getting subsidy, well, they're not paying rent, so effectively you're foregoing that rent, which is equivalent to the interest cost. My personal view would be actually just let's do it up front. If we're going to do it at all, you then say, here's the debt, here's the total cost, keep it in the council's books right from the start, and then charge them the appropriate rent, which in my view would be the simplest, the most transparent,
and clear-cut way, I think we should be asking them to provide the lights if we think they're our facilities.
Take lessons from you how to ask a question.
The second question is around the, again, it arises out of murkiness. My concern with all of these things is always around what does it actually do to our net costs. Whatever decisions we've made in the past, they're the decisions and we're rating for them. What would this decision do to our net costs? And it's not clear to me whether the additional ground rental being talked about for tests and one-day games has an additional offsetting cost, or whether that additional cost is actually a sunk cost. It's in our groundsmen, it's in our wages, the things, you know, as opposed to, I don't know, hiring a special tractor for 5 days or sticking temporary stands up for 5 days or whatever. Can you answer that question? Because that affects what it does to it, what the net additional impact on our rates is.
I think the closest I can get to answer that is to say that recoveries for fees and charges of this type across the board are probably in the sunk cost category.
So if there were additional ground rental for tests and one-day games, that would be additional net revenue to help offset costs that were already in place, or which we might add to through these lines.
I think that's probably the most accurate description.
Thank you.
So, sorry, can I add there? Obviously, given the nature of the lights, there are going to be a variable component, particularly around the electricity charge. You understand that, and obviously the biggest impact is your $2.5 million increase in the borrowing or servicing cost of that, which is approximately $250,000 per annum.
No, I do understand that. It's just I wasn't clear from some of the answers as to whether or not, if we got additional ground rental for a test match, whether in fact we also incur direct additional costs associated with that test match that offset that ground rental. And I think you're saying probably not.
Councillor Peake. Thank you, Your Worship. Hamish, I just wondered if you could just confirm that the capital cost of the tower and the LED lights is $2 million.
The price that Otago Cricket Association supplied, was given, is 1.98 million to 2 million for the lights and the install. Correct.
And the install, yeah.
Just one point of clarity: when that install though does exclude excavation costs, so it's all the electrical install cost.
Right. And the lifetime of
if I can be absolutely clear about that, it's really to buy them and connect them.
Right.
Use of the word install is not, it doesn't cover it all.
No foundation. Right. The lifetime of the tower and the LED lights.
Through the chair, this is touched on in the report, but the advice that I was given was the switchboards and lighting towers, it would be reasonable to expect them to last at least 50 years. The lamps, they do need replaced more frequently than that. From talking to AOTIA who serviced the Carisbrook lights, they said they replaced only up to, I think, 9 or 10 lamps over the period that they had. But in terms of our operating costs, we factored in the 36,000 per annum operating costs. We factored in some lamp replacement for each year.
Okay. Did the OCA say they could find a guarantor for the bank loan? They weren't relying on the council to be a guarantor.
After a bit of discussion with the Otago Cricket around what shape or form council support could take, they felt that they could get a guarantor other than council. Yes.
Just finally, in terms of the rental charges, ground rentals or whatever you call them, has the association said it would be open to negotiate those? I mean, at the moment, you've put the case that they've presented, but are they open to negotiation on that?
Through the chair, yes, they are. We're currently starting to get into more detail around that now. We'd like to be in a place that we have a quite fixed proposal on the board for when the new CEO comes on board with Otago Cricket.
Your Worship, I have a couple of draft resolutions that I could put up for the purpose of debate at least, but
I'll note that, and can I come back to you because there's still a few questions. Councillor Benson-Pope.
Thank you. Apropos of guarantors, do we know how much the Otago Daily Times pays for the naming rights of the stand? And over what period? If the answer is no, just say so. Thank you. Can I just ask which other grounds, cricket grounds of an acceptable international size, which we now have here, which has subsequently been built in Christchurch and so on, how many of them have lights now and how many are proposing to install lights in New Zealand?
Through the chair, just refreshing my memory, the report states that we've got 4 venues in the North Island, that being Auckland, Hamilton, Napier and Wellington. We've got Hagley Oval and Christchurch who has consent for the lights. I understand it's just the funding that's delaying that. And Nelson with Saxton Oval may consider lights in the future, but at the moment there's 4 grounds in the North Island and none in the South Island.
So if everyone had lights, including those 3, would there be a total of 7? And we could be assured that the decisions by New Zealand Cricket about where tours went and who got the games would be determined by who was charging least for the use of their facilities. Is that a fair assumption? I'm just saying we'd still be hamstrung in terms of local events because of the competition at maximum from 6 other locations.
I think that level of information would have to come from Otago Cricket. In our discussion with Ross Dykes last week, what we were very clear about is that if those lights were provided by the time proposed, which I think is November, then New Zealand Cricket would then guarantee that the University of Dunedin was eligible for all classes of international test match. That's the level that...
with the qualification of the maximum seating capacity.
That's a minimum of 6,000.
Which is my other question, what's the quantification of the cost of the new embankment over whatever the road might be called that would provide that capacity to 6,000?
At that meeting, I'm pleased to say that we were able to confirm with Ross Dykes that the proposed embankment encroaching over the Logan Park Drive would not be necessary to achieve that target. At the moment, the capacity is between 5,000 to 5,500 to achieve a minimum of 6,000. Some adjustment of temporary seating and some work on the other embankments over by Butch Road would enable us to meet that target. There's a fair level of confidence from staff and cricket that could be achieved.
Councillor Wiley.
Thank you. You talked about the venues around, following from Benson Pope's question, about the venues around the country with lights. Can you run through that again, please?
Through the chair, this is information that Otago Cricket supplied me. We have Auckland, Hamilton, Napier and Wellington with permanent lights, and Christchurch through Hagley Oval have consent for lights, but they are not yet installed. So there's 4 venues in the North Island and none in the South Island with permanent lights.
Okay. Looking at Hagley Oval, are they going with permanent lights or retractable lights?
Through the chair, the permanent lights that telescopic. so they're actually a considerable cost, and that's part of the reason why funding's taking a while. My understanding is there's a condition of their consent that they be telescopic, so essentially they can be raised and lowered, not all the way to the ground level, just point of clarity.
Yeah, no, I understand that was some time away, like approximately 5 to 8 years away from that being active in that sense. At least that's what I did yesterday. So.
Through the chair, discussions with Ross, his estimates were that it might be 3 to 5 years away, but is very much subject to funding, and as I mentioned, the telescopic lights are a considerable cost, so it could quite possibly be 5 to 8 years.
Following up on Councillor Vandervis's questions about the Delta lights, when were they originally purchased for Carisbrook?
Through the chair, sorry, I can't respond to that.
I think it was after the quake because they went into...
No, I mean when were they originally purchased to go into Carisbrook?
Oh, I see.
Yeah, because I understood that they weren't going to be suitable for cricket.
Through the chair, that's something that we would have to go away and find out.
Okay.
If I can just add to that, in saying they're suitable for cricket maybe at that time. What we now understand is that the suitability of facilities for cricket do change with technology.
No, that's what I understood too. There was a big difference between the lighting for a big ball and a little ball, hence rugby, soccer versus cricket, and the quality that was required these days. When we look at cricket in Otago Southland, but do we know any percentages or I see junior cricket being extremely active on a Friday, and senior cricket's still relatively strong, and cricket in schools being strong. So are we looking at a healthy sport in Dunedin?
Through the chair, it's probably a question that we would need to direct to Sport Otago, but we certainly, through our service level agreements that we have with all the codes, we haven't had the need to increase or reduce any grounds that we provide. We may, by season, increase the number of fields within a ground for winter, but there hasn't been any demand for increase or reduction for cricket at this stage. There is community demands a wee bit to have artificial wickets at grassroots level, at schoolboy grades, in some of our areas where we don't provide them. But that's always been the case where people like to try and at least have a practice area that's close to their home anyway. But we work closely with Dunedin Cricket to try and coordinate where we can any additional infrastructure. But on the whole, the numbers relatively stick around the same.
Okay. The use of University Oval with lights, would other codes be looking at it? For example, football, rugby league, women's sport. Are they all keen on the lights as well? Is there any feedback there?
Through the chair, it's probably early days. As a venue manager, we kind of see that it does have the potential, but there hasn't been any great burst of requests or inquiries coming through about what that might mean for other codes. But certainly rugby in the winter, we would anticipate that there would be some opportunity there for some night games. With the stadium right next door, we know that when international teams are coming, they like to be able to try and train within the same sort of environment. So having training opportunities under lights would certainly be a benefit in that respect.
Oh, sorry, I thought you might be adding something.
If I can, I'd just like to remind again, it doesn't alter in any way what Lisa's just said, but of course that would be, any future use capacity would be negotiated with the university and the University Rugby Club.
Enjoying watching cricket. In the Big Bash from Australia and things like that. Really, the three major nations, Australia, England, and India, are driving how cricket is televised, and they're all from what I'm seeing, they're all demanding day-night, especially night cricket, hence the emergence of Test cricket being sampled later this year or early next year with a day-night Test format. So obviously, with what I'm seeing is the lights are important for us to stay on that rotation for Test cricket.
If I may, through the chair, the lights are important to stay on that rotation to get those countries playing. It wouldn't exclude us getting any other teams that tour New Zealand. They are referred to as Class 1 and Class 2 countries, and lights would certainly keep us at that high level to attract the England, India and Australia.
Okay. And then on 18.10.12, there's 4 bullet points. The third and fourth bullet points I want to sort of touch on, where it talks about lights and the ability in the 2013-14 season, the vaults were the top qualifiers in the HRV 2020, but the final could not be held in Dunedin due to the lighting. Broadcast competition requirements as well, but it was also likely that sports lights will become requisite for all teams in the domestic competition in the not too distant future. So my concern was how that would impact on Otago cricket or the vaults and our position in playing national cricket.
Okay, through the chair, I really feel that needs to be addressed to Otago cricket because the frequency of these opportunities is obviously an important factor in this. My understanding is that obviously if there is lighting there and a team is in a competition that demands lighting to be there, obviously it's a prerequisite. But how often and feasible that is, and if it's the only option, that would really need to be answered by Otago cricket.
Well, then moving to the top of that, the first paragraph on that same page under domestic cricket, Sky Television 2012 really started looking at providing night games and with 7 p.m. starts, wanting for the coverage. So I'm just trying to get a feel. We talked about games starting earlier and playing in the twilight, but obviously a 3-hour game starting at 7 o'clock, if that's what television is demanding for cricket, even Volt and Otago cricket games, and I sort of look at the need or the requirements of certain lighting for television. And can you...
Yes, through the chair, our lighting down on the ground certainly comes into question after about 6 p.m, 7 at the latest, so any games that start at 7 would definitely need to have lights if that's where 2020 is going.
Okay. Sorry, a question for John Christie, if possible. Just a little bit earlier, someone asked about economic development and enterprise Dunedin and benefits and such. Would you have a rough estimate on how many bed nights were used in the last 4 nights?
Sorry, I don't have the answer to that, but it would depend on how many are coming from out of the city, and obviously that's some data that we'll need to ascertain.
Okay. The quick figures I was able to put together yesterday was they were talking just with the teams, the entourage, the media, Sky Television, we're looking at about 250 room nights times 4, so 1,000 room nights, plus meals, etc. So, plus the visiting crowd. So would that sort of be a starting point for you?
Yeah, it definitely would be. Yep, sounds like a reasonable estimate.
Okay. Sorry, I've just got one or two more questions. Are there any guarantees for Test cricket coming to Dunedin over the next few years?
If I can, there are no guarantees. New Zealand Cricket give assurances and parameters for those assurances to Otago Cricket, but I'm very aware there are no guarantees. I guess on any long-term schedule, it's obviously in this case the lights are being an important factor in being considered for a certain level of international games against certain teams, but I understand that we are certainly in the University Oval facility certainly considered for test matches, but the scheduling of those and how often they're available is something between New Zealand Cricket and Otago Cricket. I don't know if there's any information. Do you have any information on the latest schedule?
Just through the Chair, just an additional comment. Discussions with Ross Dykes, he confirmed that generally the venues are allocated 9 to 15 months ahead of the team. So New Zealand Cricket is currently working on their list of tours for the next eight years, but the actual venues will be allocated 9 to 15 months ahead of the team visiting, if that makes sense.
Okay. I'm sorry to go on about this, but did you... well, yesterday I received a copy of a letter from Ross Dykes when I was at the cricket. And he indicated that it had been passed on to staff, and that was dated, the letter was dated the 19th of December 2014. And in that letter it states that I'm pleased to, this is from David White, Chief Executive Officer of New Zealand Cricket. Further to our meeting with the Dunedin City Mayor on 20th of November, I'm pleased to confirm that New Zealand Cricket can guarantee that each season from December 2015 until March 2023, the University Oval will be allocated a minimum 1 test and 1 ODI.
Mr. McCann, that letter was tabled and discussed at our meeting, and there were other assurances in that letter which I've mentioned earlier on about the eligibility, the capacity minimum. Yep, that's an assurance that New Zealand Cricket have given to Otago Cricket.
Yeah, and the other issues were, you're exactly right, the 6,000, the ground capacity is increased to a minimum of 6,000, the lights installed at the approved ICC standard, the playing wicket is an acceptable international standard, well, based on the comments of the weekend, it definitely is, and NZ's Cricket can agree suitable venue hireage terms of Otago Cricket. Okay. Just doing some quick sums here, and this is my last question, I'll move on after this, is if we looked at $2 million over 20 years, say it's 100k plus interest. Based on the figures you're talking about, ground hire, etc., we're looking at an increased income of $45,000 from Otago Cricket for the venue hire, etc. So really, the shortage would be $55,000 plus interest.
Well, Councillor Chair, my maths without a calculator isn't that great. I don't know about the interest on $2 million. My understanding is that it will be more than 100k per year over every year for 20 years to repay that. I would have thought it was closer to 150 to 170k, but I'll stand to be corrected on that.
So generally we use about 10% of being capital and principal and interest, sorry. So you're looking for your $2.5 million or your $2 million, about $200,000 a year over a 20-year period. So that's what basically the table line works out at the current interest rates.
Okay.
Councillor McTavish, did you have a...
Yeah, well, just for clarity on that point, I think it needs to be clear that the $45,000 increase in ground rental is to be offset by a $36,000 approximate increase in the cost of servicing the lights and of physicals maintenance and servicing the lights, correct?
Through the Chair, that is correct, and that's also contingent on the energy cost as well, the cost of power, which, as you know, fluctuates.
Councillor Bizet.
My question is to Mr. Mackenzie. Given the comment he made before that the process that we're discussing today, in his view, was messy, I suspect the reason why is because of the short time frame that Otago Cricket have to put in action the installation of these lights if that comes to pass. That is why they've come with this proposal. because it gives us a bit of breathing space before we have to commit to funds. Nonetheless, is that proposal that they are suggesting going to cost our ratepayers any more than the clean process that you would put in place?
I can't say with certainty because I don't know the number of events you're going to have with certainty or the actual cost of running the lights with certainty more than what we've got now. But I guess when you look at it at the high level, what they're effectively asking for is that we forego additional income while they're paying this additional expense. So you would actually say generally it would not cost us any more their way versus the alternative way. If it's going to cost you more, it's going to cost you more under either option.
Councillor Hall.
My question was similar to Councillor Benson Pope with the embankment. If they, you said they can do minor changes to the ground to bring them up to capacity, have you done an estimated cost on that?
Through the chair, no we haven't. We're starting to narrow down our options and starting to cost that over the next wee while, but nothing that we can table at the moment.
Last year, in the annual plan, they said they wanted the embankment. Did you do a costing on that? Extending the embankment at Logan Park Drive, have we done a costing on that?
If I can, Councillor, I actually redirected staff on that one because from early discussion with the University Oval and with stakeholders at Logan Park, it was pretty clear that there was a considerable concern about the embankment. There was a little bit of uncertainty about what exactly we would be pricing up in terms of how to maintain. I guess the design, we were given a rough concept and Otago Cricket made that very clear. They were given a concept, they were not giving a design specification. So what height it was, how it was to be retained, how it was to be held in place, that would have been a considerable exercise. We'd in fact have to go and design it. And at that stage of consideration, we weren't positioned to do that. And we weren't sure about what all the options for design were. There was a concept of being able to do it.
So if the lights go ahead, what's the chance of them coming back again and saying, hey, we haven't got the capacity, we want to go ahead with this?
If I can, it's a good question. That's one of the main reasons we wanted to have the meeting that we had with Ross to discuss through a number of issues like that, to I guess draw some lines in the sand. And that's where we address the question of the questions that come from the New Zealand cricket specifications, particularly around capacity of minimum of 6,000. And that's why we walked away from that meeting with Ross saying that yes, if we can meet that 6,000 minimum, we, Dunedin, Otago Cricket, the University Oval, collectively, if we can meet that 6,000, then that specification is fulfilled. Now, with the situation at the moment with the temporary seating being used in the way that it's configured and can be configured, with looking at some extension of other embankments, I'm not talking about major earthworks, but I guess some efficiency and maybe some minor soil extensions, the embankment around Butch Road. It looks reasonable that there would be at least a couple of good options for increasing to that minimum capacity. There were between 5,000 to 5,500 people there yesterday. We're not talking about having to accommodate 2,000 to 3,000 people. Whether that specification as a minimum for 6,000 minimum remains in place and how long it remains in place for from New Zealand Cricket, nobody knows that, but that's what we're dealing with at the moment.
Thank you.
Councillor Calvert.
Two questions, one for the staff and one for Grant. The first being we haven't got anything, and it was talked about earlier from the university, which in the circumstances we would have expected Otago Cricket to ask the university for a letter of support for them, not just from New Zealand Cricket and other places. Have they talked to them, or is it just that and they're lukewarm? Have they talked to them, they're keen, but they haven't been asked for any input? Since it is sort of between us and the university that...
Our understanding, that would have to be directly addressed to both those parties, but our understanding, anecdotally from conversation, were open and clear conversation, is that certainly as far as the lights are concerned, the University of Otago has given its is supportive of that proposal. That's an assurance we've had in conversation with both parties.
So that we just don't have any paperwork. Nobody thought to ask the university for any letter of support, or...
That would have to be addressed to Otago Cricket. It's their proposal. We haven't challenged that or followed that up and asked for evidence at this stage.
And for Grant, I'm guessing that the reason that nobody's terribly concerned about finding a guarantee for this is that we are effectively guaranteeing it. Because if we got to the stage where we were promising to buy them in 3 years, we are effectively the guarantor. A bank would lend money to somebody on the basis that they knew they had a definite sale coming up and wouldn't be terribly concerned about the guarantee, except possibly for the detail of whether there was a shortfall, they hadn't been paying their interest on time or whatever. But we are effectively guaranteeing it if we promise to buy it, aren't we?
Well, effectively, you've got a conditional sale and purchase agreement, so the banks would look at that.
An unconditional sale and purchase agreement.
It depends if the conditions have been met, i.e. lights have been installed and everything else has been carried out.
Yes, but it's
but
not
we're
one that we could renege on, so we're effectively guaranteed.
So from a technical perspective, we're not a guarantee, but from a practical perspective, you'd say they're in a very strong situation.
Councillor Thompson. Councillor Staines.
This is probably a question you can't answer, I think, given a comment made by Grant before, but it seems to me that to install lights for 2 fixtures a year doesn't make any sense at all. Do we have any idea of the cost to turn the lights on, the operational cost to run the lights? So if the university rugby club wanted to play a game under lights, is it going to cost them $100 to turn the lights on, or $1,000, or $10,000? Because it's that quantum, and I know that at Carisbrook it was so expensive to turn the lights on, unless you had a revenue stream you weren't going to do it. Are these in fact lights that could be used for the benefit of other sporting codes at an amateur level, or is it way beyond that?
Sorry to confirm the fact that I can't answer another question. The cost, no, we haven't extrapolated that at all. The benefit of being able to have lights that could be used to attract more use, I guess it's stating the obvious, but that's also limited by the ground itself and how often it can be used in terms of it already is a reasonably high capacity ground. Does it logically mean that it can then be used for another period of time which is normally not available, i.e. during darkness? How's that going to affect wear and tear? How's that going to affect the quality of it? Those are good questions. We haven't extrapolated to that degree. I'm sorry.
Can I just add for clarity, the Councillor Staines, it's not just for the 2 games they're referring to, that's for New Zealand Cricket. On top of that, you then need to talk about the vaults, and then which is the 2020, and then there's the 1 days, and then some of the Plunket Shield, but I'm still fairly sure that Plunket Shield is just day cricket. So.
Councillor McTavish. No. Okay. So there are no further questions? Right, Councillor, what I'm going to propose, Councillor Pete, is that you let us know what your proposed resolution is, see if we get a seconder, and then we break for morning tea, to give everyone time to digest it and some of what we've already learned. So I invite you to just read out your proposed motion.
Right. Yeah. Thank you, Your Honour. Your Worship.
Your remarks?
I've been before a court before either. Yeah, I haven't put a figure in here, but up to 2 million is what I'm thinking, of course. But move that provision be made in the LTP to reimburse the Otago Cricket Association from year 2018-19 for a set of permanent LED lights at the University of Otago Oval and take over ownership and maintenance of the lights from the OCA at that time. That staff further negotiate with the OCA the terms of this arrangement, which may include a rent holiday and increased ground rentals for major international fixtures, and report back to Council.
I'll second that.
So seconded, Councillor Bezet. Okay. I'm going to suggest that we break now, and I'll invite you to speak to it at the outset when we reconvene. So we'll be back here at 11:45.
Well, that's the next.
Okay, let's get back into it. Councillor Peake, I see your motion is on the wall. Yep. So I invite you to speak to it.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think I just wanted to signal that it's important that we send a positive message to New Zealand Cricket and Otago Cricket Association, who are the applicants here, because for a number of reasons. I mightn't have the wording right, and it might change considerably. I realise that, but at least I wanted to get into some debate about it. When we decided to build a loaf tin instead of a cake tin, we excluded cricket, and I think everybody understands that now. But actually there are some synergies between the two stadia. And the synergies are with, as we saw at the weekend, the shared temporary seating and the sharing of ground staff and equipment, I think, is something very positive too between Forsyth Park Stadium and the University of Otago Oval. In terms of the strategic fit in this document we have here, I think it ticked only a couple of boxes, as you know, but there were two boxes that I felt that it should have been ticked. Even in the spatial plan, a vibrant and exciting city would have at least reasonable or limited tick in there, and the other one in the parks, the parks and rec strategy, it would be, I think, reasonable to tick the accessible claim on that too. I mean, I think as we've heard from the questions today, I mean, this is about more than just supporting cricket. This is about the city benefiting from a boost to its visitor and tourism industries and its profile generally. We had 3 days of Sky television coverage over the last 3 days, and it was amazing. Of course, it was going out internationally. Certainly the Black Cap Sri Lanka games, and what struck me about that, well, more than anything, was that we had no Dunedin signage whatsoever there. There wasn't a way of, if you were looking at it for any time, of seeing that. I just wanted to say first of all that I think we missed a trick in terms of publicising Dunedin. And the place I would put a sign is up on the end of the Sargot Centre, a huge big wall that says nothing, and it might add to the green effect of this beautiful boutique cricket ground, but it didn't say much about Dunedin. I think in some ways the stars are aligning for a development like this, and I'll run through them. And, cricket is, of course, New Zealand's leading premier summer sport, and it's on a roll too now with the Black Caps. The New Zealand cricket leadership at this time is a Dunedin-oriented one, and so we shouldn't overlook that aspect too. That will change over the years, obviously. We have a program that's of international events that's about to be negotiated in the future, and I think Dunedin, certainly with lights, would be in the mix to attract the teams from what they call the big three: India, Australia and England. Of course, Scotland would be based here during the World Cup. I think New Zealand Cricket CEO David White's letter last month was about as strong a signal as you might expect in terms of Dunedin gaining matches so long as there were lights. I think the use by other codes is an interesting one, and the University of Otago's rugby club is headquartered there, but there is also an opportunity, I understand, for the use of the University of Otago Oval for football and for rugby league. The finance side is interesting, and I would take Grant McKenzie's opinion that it is a bit messy, but in fact, for me at least, it gives us time to consider where our finances are heading, and I think the 3 years space that we would have before we were getting into funding would allow us time to assess our assets as we're about to do later this year, I think. Also, I think that in recommendation 2 there that we get to negotiate further with OCA over the ground rentals and other things. I think they are open for negotiation. The opportunity then is as the cricketing fraternity have expressed to us, a narrow window of opportunity because of the programs that they have ahead. The programs ahead that they need to decide on in the next year or so. I think this sort of opportunity, though, to erect the lights at the University Oval will come to us only once in a decade or even a generation. And so I think we need to send as firm and strong a support for the lights as we possibly can. And any kind of hesitation, I suspect, may count against the need. With that, Your Worship, I think I'll leave my comments.
Okay. Councillor Thompson.
I'm a cricket tragic, and it's one of the great mysteries of my life that people haven't put cricket dates and calendars first and then worked all other meetings out around them. My life would have been so much more enjoyable. But I can't support this as it is, and I'm signalling an alternative motion in the event that this were to fail, which is not withdrawing support, but to do some further work around what I consider to be quite a substandard proposal and set of information, and to include the item as an unfunded item to enable us the time to revise that work. I do think that the lights are required, and we can argue about what drives that, but the reality is that as we have seen with domestic cricket, where we have a domestic cricket team that in fact virtually is almost not going to play at home, that it is driven by television audiences. And that raises the whole spectre of professional sport and the oft-heard view that we are being asked to subsidise professional sport. I just want to put a slight counter to that. We also have to be cognisant of those who just sit and watch. Sport is not just about, in cricket's case, 22 flannel falls on a field, no matter how much they're paid. It's about 5,000 people sitting around and getting a great deal of enjoyment out of it. Or it's about having a domestic representative team that inspires young kids to want to play the game, and even if they spend most of their time hitting a cricket bat and ball on the other side of the embankment when they get to the game, it's nevertheless an important part of growing up, and it's part of our culture, and I think that we have to be cognizant of the fact that if we want to maintain that, we have to accept that life is changing around us and there are some costs associated with that. So I am definitely supportive of looking to find a way to improve the facility to retain that. I just don't think that we should be signalling that this is entirely our cost. And my alternative motion would be to better, firstly, allow us time to get a more sensible proposal, to better understand the net additional costs on our rates, and to engage with both Otago Cricket and New Zealand Cricket around their relevant roles in this. New Zealand Cricket is driving night cricket because it generates extra revenue for them. They have to invest in that too. And in my view, there is a role for them, whether it's through Otago Cricket or through New Zealand Cricket, that we need to have further discussion with them around that. And if they want to say, no, that's your business, well, they've got to understand the ramifications of international cricket only being played in the North Island and how well that will go down. So I just think we need a little bit of time to get this right. And so I'm, in speaking against this motion, it's not through a negative sentiment, it's not through a belief that we don't need this, it's through a belief that we could actually do it better at less cost to ratepayers, and we just took a little bit more time to get it right.
Thank you. Councillor McTavish.
Thank you, Worship. Well, I, like Councillor Thompson, will not be supporting these motions. I think regardless of the merits of the underlying concept, and Councillor Thompson has spoken to those, and I'm no cricket expert, so I guess there is a degree to which I take advice from others on that. I think it has been stated that the proposal in front of us is messy, and I think that's probably kind. I think it is certainly very underdeveloped, and it is exceedingly light on detail, and I think while staff have done a good job of pulling together everything that they could in relation to this proposal, I think it would be sending altogether the wrong message to indicate that a proposal with that is so light on detail is put into our long-term plan. In terms of the actual funding mechanism, I take the Chief Financial Officer's point that it is buying second-hand lights, but I think it's more than that. It's not actually us buying second-hand lights, it's us committing a future council to purchasing second-hand lights, and I think there is a distinct difference there. For the same reason why I spoke in favour of option 2 in relation to the Portobello Harrington Point works, seawall safety improvement works, inclusive of cycleway. I speak against a proposal which defers the drawing down of debt and the start of our 20-year repayment period 3 years into the future. I think that is wrong from an intergenerational perspective, and I think that I don't want to be part of a council that puts costs and commits future councils to costs which they don't have any say in. So I think that is a crucial differentiation, and I think it's not a decision that we ought to take lightly. In terms of the detail which needs to be worked out, I mean, I think there's been a raft of questions that have canvassed that, but certainly there is, I think, a need, or certainly a need to demonstrate that there is a fundraising plan on behalf of the Otago Cricket Association. I think that there is a need to demonstrate that they have considered other funders and other potential funding options before they come to us. I think there is a need for us to consider how other sports have funded their investments in lighting, and ensure that we're being consistent in that regard. And whilst I understand that the mover has a view that the deferred time frame would allow us to assess our assets, I think it is critical to understand that we are not putting a toe in the water. What we would be committing to with an arrangement like this is, it is a commitment. It's not an, oh, we might think about this in 3 years' time. It's, yeah, we're going to do this in 3 years' time. And I think that that is a distinction that needs to be made and needs to be understood. So I won't be supporting this. I may support Councillor Thompson foreshadowed motion.
Councillor Bazet.
I support the resolutions, and I'd just like to build on a couple of comments that Councillor Peake made with regards to Otago being the centre of cricket at the moment. He's quite right, and not only the centre of cricket in New Zealand, we also have leadership, strong leadership in New Zealand cricket with the CEO and the President of New Zealand cricket are also from Otago. And we have two of our leading provincial sides top of the competition, and we have, it is a growing sport in Dunedin, and there's also a sport that boys and girls, the numbers are increasing. The reason why I make these points is we're dealing with a credible organisation. They're a strong organisation. They don't have funds. A lot of these rugby, cricket and hockey and other sports don't have funds. Are mostly run because they've got a strong volunteer base. They deserve to have some support. Now, I accept there's a risk involved, but it's not a great risk. I think if this will happen in the future, these lights will go in, and it's a question of when. Now, if you put it in as an unfunded item, it's just going to delay the issue. But for what reason? The only reason is to get more information, and that's a good reason, but the information that we get is there. It's just that the time frame they're working at the moment, they haven't been able to come to us with a well put together application for funds. But that's nonetheless, it doesn't mean to say they don't deserve it. I think that the ratepayers of Dunedin expect to pay some funds towards this type of activity. It's not only entertainment, it's economic development as well. So, and you've heard the comments that Mr. Christie made earlier on with regards to the sort of return you can expect on this type of activity if you improve the facilities to the degree that Otago Cricket are wanting. So I support them. There is not only cricket involved. I mentioned in my questioning earlier on about the University Rugby Club. Now they are involved as well. There are a number of institutions, and the Otago University is another one, that will be right behind this proposal, but they haven't, the Otago Cricket Association haven't put that proposal together as yet, but that will be forthcoming. They just need time to do it. And we've got time. We're looking at funding for our 2018-2019 year. And it is a commitment. I accept what Councillor McTavish said, it is a commitment, but we also have opportunities to look at other ways of funding this in that time. Now, Mr. McKenzie said it's not the cleanest process, and I accept that as well, but it is a process that will get the desired improvements off the ground sooner rather than later. So what I'm saying to Council is, it is a risk, but I think it's an acceptable risk. We have time to put together a proposal that not only this council, but our fellow council not here today will accept. The Otago Cricket Association have time to put together a package that will involve the University Rugby, the DCC, the Otago University, the Community Trust, private funding, and other possible contributors to this amount of money. So, if you want to take the cautious approach, then by all means put it in unfunded. But I'm asking this council to take a calculated risk because we have got time on our side to put together a real package. So please support it.
Councillor Stones.
I'm not a cricket tragic, as Councillor Thompson is, but my gut feeling is that having the ability to play in the lights at the University Oval would be beneficial, both from a city marketing point of view and from an economic benefit. But at the moment, we have a proposal before us that I think is just too loose. My concern is there's insufficient information or certainty on the proposal that we're trying to consider. That doesn't mean to say that the underlying proposal is bad, but it says to me I can't make the decision in favour of these resolutions because I do not have the confidence that we understand all of the implications, all of the costs, and the revenue streams that will come from them. In a financially constrained budget period, I think we need to be absolutely convinced that if we're going to put something into the plan as a funded item, as these resolutions would suggest, that we are absolutely certain that it's the best use of the very limited funds we might have available. On this stage, we're not even completely sure whether there's any wriggle room in our budgets to add items that are nice to have, such as these. So I can't support the current resolutions. I wait to see Councillor Thompson's resolutions, but I would support resolutions that put the proposal to fund in the LTP as an unfunded item, indicating the rate's effect based on what we know so far. And that would then give cause to our residents to consult with us on how they feel about it. During that same period, I would hope that the resolution would go on to cover the fact that there needs to be more work between Otago Cricket, New Zealand Cricket and our staff to put something in front of us before our annual plan deliberations, annual plan long-term plan deliberations in, I think, late May, that gives us a much better foundation on which to assess whether we apply any limited wriggle room in our budget to the lighting project or not. So, in principle, I support the concept. I think it will have positive effects for both the sporting codes and our city, but without a more rigorous proposal, I can't support it.
Councillor Benson Pope.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I can't imagine there are too many people in this room or in the city who wouldn't agree that lights of some sort at the University of Otago Oval are highly desirable and a jolly good idea, irrespective of who might be making the benefit or profit from their existence. In terms of the economic development opportunities for the city, it's clearly not just the hospitality and accommodation industry that profit from the increased activity. It's the same issue really as we have around major sporting facilities internationally, where various organisations and media organisations are blackmailing local authorities and governments into providing facilities for their use. But that notwithstanding, the value of the coverage for the city, the exposure to the city that Councillor Pete referred to is immeasurable, to say nothing of the enjoyment people get out of obviously the sort of event we had in the weekend. But I think these motions are premature. I can't recall a proposal recently that's come to the council that's as vague or at least non-specific as this one.
and much nor as I see the installation of facilities like this as desirable, I certainly can't support these motions. That's not to say that I won't support what Councillor Thompson foreshadows, because I want to keep this issue alive, because I think it's important, and I think it's important that people have the opportunity to respond to it as well. But it's not as if the city's been ungenerous to OCA or the funding and development of the oval we're talking about. Staff have already told us this morning that some millions, not quite quantified, were spent on previous projects of various kinds to get the ground and the oval into the state that we now enjoy, and indeed other proposals around the fringe in every sense have been dealt with out of operational budgets. So I think the city has more than shown its goodwill in terms of cooperation with this sporting code, and an important sporting code. And I think with proper discussion with Otago Cricket and some detail of what is proposed and some finite information about costs, I mean, frankly, to bring a proposal to us that talks about the installation cost installed of lights and then find that doesn't include the foundations for the towers is not really performing the due diligence that should be coming to this organisation. So I look forward to an ongoing discussion about this. We'll certainly have that. I'd like the community to have some input about it, but I'm not prepared to support these motions for inclusion at this point, although I would like to see the item included in the plan as an unfunded item so that we can consult with the community on it.
Thank you. Councillor Campbell.
I have some similar concerns about these two motions, and I've been struggling to understand what putting it in a long-term plan as if it's something we'll just work towards, when actually the commitment would need to be made now to have it 3 years out. And the only way through that I see is Councillor McTavish's approach, which I like for a different reason than she likes it probably, which is do it up front. If we're going to be doing this, we would do it up front. And what we'd be doing up front, although the whole proposal has a lot of uncertainty about it, the certainty we do have is that it will be at least $2 million we're being asked for, and that is increasing our debt by $2 million. That drives a tank right through the middle of our proposal to be reducing debt. I'm happier about putting it in as a unfunded item, so long as we're clear that it's not just the rating effect it has on our community when we put it up for consultation, it's also an increase in debt that we have in all sorts of other ways committed ourselves to not doing, and we intend to continue to. So anybody who's making suggestions in the plan process, I would like them to have as a consultation document that they're also making suggestions about running a tank through our general debt program. The only other thing that I think is useful to have some thought of in this process is that I was interested in Councillor Thompson's comment that it wasn't just the people who were playing, but it was also the people who were watching. And I haven't heard any suggestion that any women play cricket in New Zealand, do they? Would they be playing here? Would they be playing any
The national final of the women's
any matches here? So it.
New Zealand
Yes, no, I'm just saying that we haven't actually discussed whether paternity. Yeah, whether the games that we could expect are different. Are we including women's games and men's games in the proposal? I'm not asking what has been happening in a way, and I'm not suggesting that our women cricketers aren't good. What I'm saying is it's as if this is for men to play and women to watch from the conversations that have been had around the table, and that's a reflection, not a criticism. But I'd like to, when this proposal is fleshed out, if it is, and I would support it, unfunded, not funded, I would like to see some full look at all the people who might be playing cricket in a financial category on that oval.
Councillor Wiley.
Thank you. I'll just quickly touch on a point that Councillor Calvert made. On Saturday there was the women's final of the provincial cricket. We have the world #1 player here in Susie Bates. Unfortunately we did not win the game, so it didn't quite hit the top of the paper, and on that basis Wellington were just too strong. Anybody who watched the cricket over the last 2 days, or 3 days, Friday and Sunday, went to the ground, talked to people that were at the ground, watched it on television, would definitely see the value of cricket in Dunedin and international cricket in Dunedin. I'm not going to reiterate the marks made by Councillor Peet and Bizet. They've touched on a lot of the key points, and I'm going to support this motion, obviously. The parts I want to touch on is that we can't undervalue the city visuals, the vibe. The commentators, when they come to Dunedin and these events, just give such great wow factors and accolades for the venue and for the city. Unfortunately, the sport is moving in a slightly different direction, and if we're going to stay in that direction, we have to keep up with the game. And cricket is going to go day-night, whether we like it or not. So we have to participate in day-night in international cricket, we're going to have lights. Either that or we're going to lose international cricket. It's a really black and white decision on that basis. The part that I really looked at and watched the game was the economic impact. Now, it was interesting because when they gave up some fan packs around the ground, one of the ladies that won the beach cricket set was from Gore. It brought the family up. Another person who won was from Cromwell. So we're not just talking Dunedin, we're talking Otago, we're talking South Island, and we're talking national. On top of that, there was some increase of Sri Lankan visitors. You looked around the boards, the hoardings at the game. There were 2 Sri Lankan companies, or / Sri Lankan Indian companies, advertising on the hoardings, so it shows exposure is going back there. Local companies got great advertising nationally and internationally. But then we go on to the other benefits. You know, what would it cost us to market into India when the Indian test match was on, should it come, or should we put lights in, and to really talk about our education and international programs here, whether it's Polytech, university. The visuals we create are strong tourism, and I've already touched on the bed nights, on approximately 1,000 bed nights this past weekend. I'd be intrigued to see how that increases after a report from Enterprise Dunedin. And the business relationships, whether it's exporters or even companies here in Dunedin. Again, the city vibe is impressive. Everybody loves cricket in Dunedin. On that basis, we just have to get in behind it. Again, I touched on the lights are vital. It's vital for even just domestic cricket. You know, we've got some of the best cricketers in the world playing our domestic scene. We want to continue that. We want to grow that. And it's men's and women's. And there's also the ability to have another sports venue where we can play league, soccer, football, rugby, etc. under lights. Those things are important. The part that I also look at is we're not looking at a fringe sport here. The figures from Cricket Otago talk about 11% active rate of the game. And whether that's full competitive, whether that's junior cricket, whether that's playing twilight cricket in the business house leagues, etc. They've just had a 3-year program through the schools in relation to the World Cup cricket coming up, and they've had an immense impact on the sport. We want to continue growing that. Dunedin would have the only premium Tier 1 ground in the South Island capable of day-night games in the next few years. Christchurch will be lagging behind. They can't, with the retractable lights, they can't put fixed lights in play. We've got a commitment from New Zealand Cricket that they will give us Tier 1 games, the leading nations, for Test cricket. In the next 8 years, India is due to tour New Zealand twice, England and the Barmy Army twice, and Australia 3 times. Now, if we got one of those games at each time it came through, the economic impact is paid for right there. It's ticked all the boxes. again, a commitment from New Zealand Cricket like this doesn't come lightly. So I'm urging other councillors for the need for council to show support for this in Otago cricket and the game, as I think it is going to be important for us going forward. Thank you.
Councillor Noon.
Thank you, Worship. Look, I support the aspirations of Otago cricket to achieve a modern day university oval to be able to host international cricket. But I'm in the camp of others who have spoken about the lack of information. My focus probably is more on the Otago Cricket's fundraising plan. I think it would be a dangerous precedent to set if we decided to support this at this point without greater clarity and commitment from Otago Cricket. I'm not suggesting they're not committed, and in fact, just following up on Councillor Bazette's point about them being a credible organisation, that proved in the past to be a very reliable partner with the city to achieve certain developments already at this ground. And the other point I'd just like to pick up on also is the Councillor Wiley alluded to the fact that it is a regional facility we're actually talking about, because the Otago Association includes the sub-associations of Central Otago and Southland. So we are looking at it on I suppose, a more of a regional basis, but the point is we just need that greater information before we make a commitment. But I'm convinced that Otago Cricket will see the reasons why we're a little bit hesitant at this point in time, and I look forward to that further information to come through so we can have greater certainty going forward.
Any further speakers? Well, before I come back to the mover, I concur with just about everyone around the table in my appreciation of the benefit that these lights would provide to the Oval and the need for them, particularly as one speaker has said, in the context of a changing sporting environment. But this proposal is half-baked at the moment. It's not well developed. There is no business case in here. And as I listened to all the questions earlier on in the meeting, there were so many questions asked that just there are no answers to yet about what the implications of this might be, or what the benefit of this might be. And I think we have an obligation to quantify some of those. And I would disagree with those that say that this is a sound economic development proposal. It is an economic development proposal, but we don't know if it's sound or not, because again, there's no figures around it. And I certainly believe that in Enterprise Dunedin, if we were looking at putting 200,000 a year into anything, we would want some very firm projections and some very firm figures coming back about what the economic benefit would be to the city before we would commit to that scale of investment. But really, in this particular, the present financial context for the council, and in the context of the proposal, there is simply far too much being asked of the DCC in this proposal. We're essentially being asked to provide all the capital and then forego some incidental income along the way, so that Otago Cricket can service the borrowing on that in the meantime. Apart from the 500,000, which hasn't been started yet, we're being asked to provide almost all of this, and I think that's excessive. I think in the long run this will need a broader consortium of support, and I see reference has been made to the university, reference has been made to Otago Cricket's bank, possibly the community trust, as well as council. And we've got to realise here that although there will be clear benefits to the city and our sporting fraternity and our spectator fraternity, the main beneficiary of lights is cricket and the broadcasters that go with it. So I think that this whole proposal needs to be reshaped, and in a way that puts more of the cost where the benefits are likely to fall. And I think finally, I feel it would be irresponsible for me to vote to put this in as a funded item without the scrutiny which we've applied to the Mosgiel Pool proposal, and it was far more developed than this, far more information, and we still said, look, we need more. So I think it would be, I would be acting irresponsibly if I voted to just bung this in to the plan without a considerable amount more work being done. Councillor Peake, you will write a reply.
Thank you. It's encouraging to hear the support, at least in principle, for the lighting the University of Otago Oval. I've gone into bat for it and lasted a few balls, but probably it'll be a duck by this end. But nonetheless, I think, and the point of the second resolution was, I think, has been expressed well around the table that the proposal does need more development, and we would rely on staff to negotiate to find a clearer pathway for the costs and the benefits of installing these lights. So more detail obviously is required. So with that, I mean, I think we are, by looking at this project, we are anticipating kind of a change and trying to get ahead of how the game is changing in New Zealand, certainly in terms of the fact it's driven by television broadcasting. So we want to try to keep on the front foot with it, use another cricketing term, and I hope that whatever comes of our decision today, that we do keep on the front foot.
Thank you. I'm going to put it. All those in favour, please say.
Division.
Division. Yeah.
Councillor Benson Pope.
No.
Councillor Bezette.
Aye.
Councillor Calvert.
No.
Councillor Hall.
No.
Councillor McTavish. No. Councillor Noon.
No.
Councillor Peake.
Aye.
Councillor Staines.
No.
Councillor Thompson.
No.
Councillor Wiley.
Aye.
Mayor Cull.
No.
Lost 3-8.
Okay. Now, sorry, I don't recall who it was. Was it Councillor Thompson? You suggested you had something to...
I had forwarded through to Pam, so I'll just wait till it's up there, I guess. Look, I think I put it in two parts because there may be differing opinions about the two parts. The part one, I think, self-explanatory, and we've had that discussion already, I think. Part two is oh, sorry, I should be.
That's good.
Yeah, right. Part two is really to recognise that there are a substantial range of interests here, and that I think the DCC's potential contribution to this need not be as high as is suggested. I think this is actually potentially a regional project. It pulls people from right round this region. There will not be, well, I shouldn't say there will not be, it is highly unlikely that there will be another first-class cricket ground south of, certainly south of Christchurch, which will have lights. Even ones like Queen's Park and Invercargill have actually struggled to maintain first-class standards on the actual ground itself, and there have been many years where cricket's in fact not been actually played there because the ground is simply not good enough. So I think that there is the potential to seek funds elsewhere. I think that the Otago Cricket do need to put more towards this. Now, whether that's in conjunction with an arrangement with their national body or whether that's quite separate, I don't know. That's over to them to work out. And I think that if we were to get a clear signal into the annual plan around the potential worth of this and the potential impact on rates, if we were funding X amount or Y amount, so that people could get a feel for it. And in the meantime, we engage much more formally with Otago Cricket, but signal clearly to them that that 500,000 from them and 2.5 million from us and the ongoing operating costs from us isn't probably going to cut it, and we need to actually think a bit more broadly than that. So I do wish this to be seen as a reflection of support for the proposal. I certainly support it, but it's just got to be done differently to how it's being suggested at the moment.
In light of that, Councillor Thompson, can I suggest an initial part to the motion that the Otago Cricket be advised that Council supports in principle the installation of lights at the University of Otago Oval?
Well, I would be perfectly happy to put that in. I just don't know whether my colleagues feel the same way, although I sense from the general discussion that that's likely to be the case.
Well, I guess I'm suggesting that to the mover and second.
I'm happy to have that put in there.
So, Councillor...
Well, I have another query of the mover and seconder, and that is, personally I think that it would be a stronger proposal should they be able to demonstrate that they had engaged with other potential funding partners as part of the process of coming to costs and impacts on rates. And I wonder whether the mover and seconder would be supportive of adding in an additional motion, maybe a new 2, which says that OCA be encouraged to engage with other potential funding partners as part of this process.
Well, that's, I think, entirely in keeping with what I'm suggesting, so if that would help obtain your support, then I'm happy to have it in there. It would be, are you suggesting that that would become a 2 and that my
Correct.
current 2 would become a 3?
3, yeah.
Councillor Benson Pope, did you hear that? You're comfortable with that? So, so there are now... we'll just have a break while Pam catches up on this, because I'm aware now that this is doubled in length. In terms of the number of...
That's a slight exaggeration. Should put you in charge of fundraising.
No, I mean, there's 4 parts to it now, not 2. That's right.
Can I ask the mover and seconder whether one could add impact on rates and on council debt levels?
Well, there wouldn't be any impact on rates if it wasn't for the fact that it impacted on debt levels. I mean, it's...
Is that a yes?
Well, can we just hold that thought until we crystallise the changes that have already been agreed by the mover and seconder?
Should be with you now, Pam.
Is this intended to be done before the consultation document goes out?
Yes. Well,
well, part 1 is.
Yeah. Sort of implies it, but doesn't. Yeah, I thought.
Oh, I understand. Yeah. Be ongoing, I guess. Now, those councillors who have suggested changes up till now, I'll come back to Councillor Calvert, can you check this and see that it's in keeping with all of them, particularly the mover and seconder, that you are comfortable with the wording before we go any further?
Could I suggest in principle support in the first line?
Yes, expresses in principle at the top. Yep, that'll do. Yep. But the part you suggested, Councillor McTavish, 2 is in line with what you...
In line with what I said, Pam. That's exactly what I said, Pam.
Oh, you sent her. Good, thank you. You're happy? Councillor Thompson, you're happy with the word?
Yeah, and in the interest of an easier life, just stick where it says and impact on rates and the timing of this impact, put and impact on rates, comma, debt, comma, and the timing of this impact.
Yep. Does that address everyone's... Right, well, call for speakers now.
Well,
Councillor Bazil.
I'm going out for that first, I think, so I'll have a crack at this one. Look, I can support this. You know, I do understand the councillor's concerns about it, but I will make a prediction that this will just delay the whole thing by a year, because I'm really confident that the Otago Cricket Association will get their act together very, very quickly, because they've got the people to do it and the will to do it. So, as I say, while I'm disappointed that we didn't support the first one, so I can support this.
Councillor Staines.
I support these resolutions, and I don't believe that they need to result in a delay of a year. I would hope that we would see a more rigorous proposal in front of us by the time we come to finalise and adopt the annual plan and long-term plan, and that having consulted on the possibility of it being in the plan, we would be in a position to decide then to put it in or not to put it in, and if it went in, it would not have resulted in a delay.
Councillor McTavish.
I'm just wondering whether, for clarity, it just needs to say, instead of and that this be put into the draft long-term plan, it should say and that this information be put into the draft long-term plan as an unfunded item for consultation.
Comfortable? Mover and seconder. Councillor Peake.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'd be concerned if a delay in a decision on a more revamped proposal and a more solid one took longer than 3 months, because we really need to make a decision in May on this, or not make a decision and risk, losing quite a lot of international fixtures over the next few years. Yeah, I can live with this as well, and look forward to the new bite of the cherry, which is another word for a red cricket ball.
Any further speakers? Councillor Thompson, do you wish to exercise your right? I'm going to put it. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. Okay, now, by my reckoning, that is the end of section 16, which is the sport, recreation and leisure section. So I will put to the Chair the 5 recommendations on page 9 and 10 of our decision sheet. Seconded, Councillor Staines. The discussion of all those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried.